All right, good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. For those of you on live stream, I do apologize. We have terrible weather right now. It's raining like crazy, and the internet is very intermittent. So we're sorry for being on late. It's hard to get things on time here. The equipment is not working exactly like we'd like it to, especially the internet. And of course, we got all flooded out this morning, so it's a little bit tough. But we can handle adversities. Didn't we talk about that in the teachings? Blessed is the man who can endure trials, adversities. So Abba wants to see if we've been listening. He said, okay, I'll test them right now. Pop quiz, here's the rain. We talked about pop quizzes. He's giving us one right now. Oh, todah, todah. Thank you, Rabba. What can we do? All right, we're going to continue in our readings of Deuteronomy. So let's begin with a blessing. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Father, we come before you, and we're going to stand here before the brethren reading your word. And so, Father, as we read the word, we ask that it will leave us in a state of excitement to hear more, to study more, that it will not leave us unchanged, that it will change us, that it would help us to become more and more transformed into the image of Yeshua. So, Father, as we come before you today, reading your word, we ask that you would allow that word to go forth and bear much fruit in every life that it touches, and that it would all be done to your glory and to your honor, as we come to you today in the authority and the name of Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen. Okay, readers, we'll begin with Ali. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Ali, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. All right, Deuteronomy chapter 15, verses 1 through 10.
At the end of every 7 years, you make a release of debts. And this is the word of the release. Every creditor is to release what he has loaned to his neighbor. He does not require it of his neighbor or his brother, because it is called the release of Yahweh. Of a foreigner you could require it, but your hand is to release whatever is owed by your brother. Only there should be no poor among you, for Yahweh does greatly bless you in the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you to possess as an inheritance. Only if you diligently obey the voice of Yahweh your Elohim to guard to do all these commandments which I am commanding you today. For Yahweh your Elohim shall bless you as he promised you, and you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow, and you shall rule over many nations, but they do not rule over you. When there is a poor man with you, one of your brothers, within any of the gates in your land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, do not harden your heart, nor shut your hand from your poor brother. For you shall certainly open your hand to him, and certainly lend him enough for his need, whatever he needs. Be on guard, lest there be a thought of Belial in your heart, saying, the seventh year, the year of release is near, and your eye is evil against your poor brother, and you give him naught. And he shall cry out to Yahweh against you, and it shall be a sin in you. You shall certainly give to him, and your heart should not be grieved when you give to him, because for this reason Yahweh your Elohim does bless you in all your works and in all to which you put your hand.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Ali. Okay, next up we've got Mark. And the rain subsided just a little bit, makes it a little easier to hear. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Mark, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Mark's going to take us now from verse 11 to 23, which is the end of the chapter.
Because the poor one does not cease from the land, therefore I am commanding you, saying, you shall certainly open your hand to your brother, to your poor, and to your needy one in your land. When your brother is sold to you, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, and shall serve you 6 years, then let him go free from you in the 7th year. And when you send him away free from you, let him not go away empty-handed. You shall richly supply him from your flock, and from your threshing floor, and from your winepress, with that which Yahweh has blessed you with. Give to him. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Mitzrayim, and Yahweh your Elohim ransomed you. Therefore I am commanding you this word today. And it shall be, when he says to you, I do not go away from you, because he loves you and your house, because it is good for him with you, then you shall take an awl and thrust it through his ear to the door, and he shall be your servant forever. Do the same to your female servant. Let it not be hard in your eyes when you send him away free from you, for he has been worth a double hired servant in serving you 6 years. And Yahweh your Elohim shall bless you in all that you do. Set apart to Yahweh your Elohim all the firstborn males that come from your herd and your flock. Do no work with the firstborn of your herd, nor shear the firstborn of your flock. You and your household are to eat it before Yahweh your Elohim year by year in the place which Yahweh chooses. But when there is any defect in it, lame or blind, or has any evil defect, do not slaughter it to Yahweh your Elohim. Eat it within your gates, the unclean and the clean alike, as the gazelle and as the deer. Only do not eat its blood. Pour it on the ground like water.
Amen. Amen. All right. Next we have Becky. Okay. He who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Becky, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, we're going to take you into chapter 16 and read verses 1 through 17. 16, 1 through 17.
See what I'm doing? Observe the month of Aviv and keep the Pesach to Adonai your Elohim. For in the month of Aviv, Adonai your Elohim brought you out of Mitzrayim at night. You are to sacrifice the Pesach offering from the flock and the herd to Adonai your Elohim, in the place where Adonai will choose to have his name live. You are not to eat any chametz with it for 7 days. You are not to eat with it matzah, the bread of affliction, for you have come out of the land of Egypt in haste. Thus you will remember the day when you left the land of Egypt as long as you live. No leaven is to be seen with you anywhere in your territory for 7 days. None of the meat from your sacrifice on the first day in the evening is to remain all night until morning. You may not sacrifice the Pesach offering in just any of the towns that Adonai your God is giving you, but at the place where Adonai your Elohim will choose to have his name lived. There is where you are to sacrifice the Pesach offering. In the evening, when the sun sets, at the time of the year that you came out of Mitzrayim, you are to roast it and to eat it in the place Adonai your Elohim will choose. In the morning you will return and go into your tents. For 6 days you are to eat matzah. On the 7th day is to be a festival assembly for Adonai your Elohim. Do not do any kind of work. You are to count 7 weeks. You are to begin counting 7 weeks from the time you first put your sickle to the standing grain. You are to observe the festival of Shavuot weeks for Adonai your Elohim with a voluntary offering, which you are to give in accordance with the decree to which Adonai your Elohim has prospered you. You are to rejoice in the presence of Adonai your Elohim. You, your sons and your daughters, your male and your female slaves, the Leviim living in your towns, and the foreigners, orphans, and widows living among you, in the place where Adonai your Elohim will choose to have his name live. Remember that you were a slave in Mitzrayim. Then you will keep and obey these laws. You are to keep the festival of Sukkot for 7 days. You have gathered the produce of your threshing floor and winepress. Rejoice at the festival. You, your sons, your daughters, your male and your female slaves, the Leviim, and the foreigners, orphans, and widows living among you. 7 days you are to keep the festival for Adonai your Elohim, in the place Adonai your Elohim will choose, because Adonai your Elohim will bless you in all your crops and in all your work, so you are to be full of joy. 3 times a year all your men are to appear in the presence of Adonai your Elohim, in the place which he will choose, a festival of Matzah, the festival of Shavuot, and the festival of Sukkot. They are not to show up before Adonai empty-handed, but every man is to give what he can in accordance with the blessing Adonai your Elohim has given you.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Becky. Okay, next up is Richard. He who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Richard, who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Richard, yours is a little complicated. You're going to go across 2 chapters here. So 16:18 to 17:10. And if you need it, it's right there so you can see it. Okay, 16:18 to 17:10.
You are to appoint judges and officers for all your gates in the cities. Adonai, your Elohim, is given you, tribe by tribe, and they are to judge the people with righteousness, judgment. You are not to distort justice or show favoritism, and you are not to accept a bribe, for a gift blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of even the upright. Justice, only justice, you must pursue, so that you will live and inherit the land Adonai your Yah is giving you. You are not to plant any sort of tree as a sacred pole besides the altar of Adonai your Elohim that you will make for yourselves. Likewise, do not set up a standing stone. Adonai your Elohim hates such things. You are not to sacrifice to Adonai your Elohim a cow or sheep that has a defect or anything wrong with it that would be an abomination to Adonai your Elohim. If there is found among you within any of your gates in any city that Adonai your Elohim gives you, a man or a woman who does what Adonai your Elohim sees as wicked transgressing his covenant by going and serving other gods and worshiping them, the sun, the moon, or anything in the sky, something I have forbidden, and it is told to you, or you hear about it, then you are to investigate the matter diligently. If it is true, if it is confirmed that such a detestable thing that are being done in Israel, then you are to bring the man or the woman who has done this wicked thing to your city gates and stone that man or woman to death. The death sentence is to be carried out only if there was testimony from 2 or 3 witnesses. He may not be sentenced to death on the testimony of only 1 witness. The witnesses are to be the first to stone him to death. Afterwards, all the people are to stone him. Thus, you will put an end to the wickedness among you. If a case comes before you at your city gate, which is too difficult for you to judge concerning bloodshed, civil suit, personal injury, or any other controversial issue, you are to get up, go to the place which Adonai your Yah will choose, and appear before the Kohanim, who are the Levine, and the judge in the office at the time. Seek their opinions, and they will render the verdict for you. You will then act according to what they have told you in that place. Adonai will choose. You are to take care to act according to all their instructions.
Amen. Amen. Okay, George. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless George, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. All right, George, take us from verse 11 to the end of the chapter. We're in chapter 17, verse 11 to the end of the chapter.
Do according to the Torah in which they teach you, according to the right ruling which they say to you. You do not turn to the right or turn to the left from the word which they declare to you. And the man who acts arrogantly so as to not listen to the priest who stands to serve there before Yahweh your Elohim, or to judge, that man shall die. So you shall purge the evil from Israel. And let all the people hear and fear, and no longer do arrogantly. When you come to the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, and shall possess it, and shall dwell in it, and you shall say, let me set sovereign over me like all the nations that are around me. You shall certainly set a sovereign over you whom Yahweh your Elohim shall choose. Set a sovereign over you from among your brothers. You are not allowed to set a foreigner over you who is not your brother. Only he is not to increase horses for himself, nor cause the people to return to Mizraim to increase horses. For Yahweh has said to you, do not return that way again. And he is not to increase the wise for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor is he to greatly increase silver and gold for himself. And it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his reign, that he shall write for himself a copy of this Torah in a book, from the one before the priests, the Levites. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, so that he learns to fear Yahweh his Elohim, and guard all the words of this Torah and these laws to do them, so that his heart is not lifted above his brothers, and so as not to turn aside from the command, right or left, so that he prolongs his days in his reign, he and his children, in the midst of Israel.
Amen. Thank you, George. Okay, we're going to go now into chapter 18 with Manny. He who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Manny, who has come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Manny's going to read verses 1 through 16 of chapter 18.
Thank you, sir. Can I just say I love my family? I love this family. I look forward to growing old together, finding our purpose. All right. The priests, the Levites, all the tribe of Levi have no part nor inheritance with Israel. They are to eat the offerings of Yahweh made by fire and his inheritance. But among his brothers, Levi has no inheritance. Yahweh is his inheritance, and he has spoken to him. And this is the priest's right from the people, from those who slaughter a slaughtering, whether it is bull or sheep. They shall give to the priest the shoulder, the two cheeks, and the stomach, the fruits of your grain and your new wine and your oil, and the first of the fleece of your sheep you give to him. For Yahweh your Elohim has chosen him out of all your tribes to stand and serve in the name of Yahweh, him and his sons forever. And when the Levite comes from one of your gates, from where he has sojourned among all Israel, and shall come with all the desire of his being to the place which Yahweh chooses, then he shall serve in the name of Yahweh, his Elohim, like all his brothers, the Levites who are standing there before Yahweh. They are to have a portion for portion to eat, besides what comes from the sale of his inheritance. When you come into the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, do not learn to do according to the abominations of those nations. Let no one be found among you who makes his son or daughter pass through the fire, or one who practices divination, or a user of magic, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For whoever does these are an abomination to Yahweh. And because of these abominations, Yahweh your Elohim drives them out from before you. Be perfect before Yahweh your Elohim. For these nations whom you are possessing do listen to the using magic and to diviners. But as for you, Yahweh your Elohim has not appointed such for you. Yahweh your Elohim shall raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst and from your brothers. Listen to him, according to all you asked of Yahweh your Elohim in Horeb in the day of assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of Yahweh my Elohim, nor let me see this great fire anymore, lest I die.
Amen, amen. Thank you, Manny. You have to understand, I know you already understand, Manny's exuberance because he's watched on the other side of that camera for a few feasts, and he's very excited to be here on this side of it for a feast. Finally, amen. Okay, Samuel. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Sam, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, you've got another one that crosses chapters. So you're going to go from 18:17 to 19:14.
And Yahweh said to me, what they have spoken is good. I shall raise up for them a prophet like you out of the midst of their brothers, and I shall put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall be, the man who does not listen to my words which he speaks in my name, I require it of him. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other mighty ones, even that prophet shall die. And when you say in your heart, how do we know the word which Yahweh has not spoken? When the prophet speaks in the name of Yahweh and the word is not, or comes not, that is the word which Yahweh has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. Do not be afraid of him. When Yahweh your Elohim cuts off the nations whose land Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, and you dispossess them and dwell in their cities and in their houses, separate 3 cities for yourself in the midst of your land, which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you to possess. Prepare a way for yourself, and divide into 3 parts the border of your land, which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you to inherit, that any manslayer shall flee there. And this matter of the manslayer who flees there and lives, he who strikes his neighbor unknowingly, not having hated him in time past, even he who goes into the forest with his neighbor to cut timber, and his hand swings a stroke with the axe to cut down the tree, and the head slips from the handle and strikes his neighbor so that he dies, let him flee to one of these cities and live. Lest the revenger of blood, while his displeasure is hot, pursue the manslayer and overtake him, because the way is long, and shall strike his being, though he was not worthy of death, since he had not hated him before. Therefore I am commanding you, saying, separate 3 cities for yourself. And if Yahweh your Elohim enlarges your border, as he swore to your fathers, and has given you the land which he promised to give to your fathers, when you guard all this, command to do it, which I am commanding you today, to love Yahweh your Elohim, and to walk in his ways all the days. Then you shall add 3 more cities for yourself besides these 3, so that innocent blood is not shed in the midst of your land, which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance, or blood guilt shall be upon you. But when anyone hates his neighbor, and shall lie in wait for him, and rise against him, and strike his being, so that he dies, then he shall flee to one of these cities. And the elders of his city shall send and bring him from there, and give him into the hand of the revenger of blood, and he shall die. Your eyes shall not pardon him, but you shall purge the blood of the innocent blood from Yisrael, so that it might not be well with you. Do not remove your neighbor's boundary, which those in the past have set in your inheritance, which you inherit in the land that Yahweh your Elohim is giving you to possess.
Amen. Amen. All right. I've got 3 more. Do you want to get in that chair? All right, Ken. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Ken who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. All right, Ken, you're going to take us now from verse 15 to chapter 20, verse 7.
One witness does not rise up against a man concerning any crookedness or any sin that he commits. At the mouth of 2 witnesses or at the mouth of 3 witnesses, a matter is established. When a malicious witness rises up against any man to accuse him of turning aside, then both men who have the dispute shall stand before Yahweh, before the priests and the judges who serve in those days. And the judges shall diligently search and see if the witness is a false witness, who has falsely accused his brother. Then you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. And let the rest hear and fear, and never again do this evil matter in your midst. And let your eye not pardon, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. When you go out to battle against your enemies, and you shall see horses and chariots, and people more numerous than you, do not be afraid of them. For Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you up from the land of Mitzrayim, is with you. And it shall be when you draw near to the battle that the priest shall come and speak to the people, and shall say to them, Hear, O Yisrael, you are drawing near today to battle with your enemies. Do not let your heart faint, do not fear or tremble or be afraid before them. For Yahweh your Elohim is he who goes with you, to fight for you against your enemies, to save you. And the officers shall speak to the people, saying, Who is the man who has built a new house and has not dedicated it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle and another man dedicate it. And who is the man who has planted a vineyard and has not begun to use it? Let him also go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle and another man should begin to use it. And who is the man who is engaged to a woman and has not taken her? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle and another man take her.
Amen, amen. Okay, thank you. All right, Arthur. Okay, he who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Arthur, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Arthur's going to take us now from verse 8 to verse 20 of chapter 20, which is the end of the chapter.
And the officer shall speak further to the people and say, Who is the man who is afraid and tender of heart? Let him go and return to his house, lest the heart of his brothers faint like his heart. And it shall be, when the officers have finished speaking to the people, then they shall appoint commanders of the divisions to lead the people. And when you draw near to a city to fight against it, then you shall make a call for peace to it. And it shall be that if it accepts your call for peace and shall open to you, then all the people found in it are to be your compulsory labor and serve you. But if it does not make peace with you, and you shall fight against it, then you shall besiege it. And Yahweh your Elohim shall give it into your hands, and you shall strike every male in it with the edge of the sword. Only the women and the little ones and the livestock and all that is in the city. And all its spoil you shall take as plunder for yourself, and you shall eat the enemy's plunder, which Yahweh your Elohim gives you. Do so to all the cities which are very far from you, which are not of the cities of these nations. Only of the cities of these people which Yahweh your Elohim gives you as an inheritance, you do not keep alive any that breathe. But you shall certainly put under the ban the Hittite, the Amorite, and the Canaanite, and the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite, as Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you. Lest they teach you to do according to all their abominations what they have done for their mighty ones, and you sin against Yahweh your Elohim. When you besiege a city for a long time by fighting against it to take it, you do not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against him. If you do eat of them, do not cut them down. For is the tree of the field a man? For is the tree of the field a man to be besieged by you? Only the trees which you know are not trees for food. You do not destroy and cut down to build siege works against the city that is fighting against you until it falls.
Amen. Amen. All right, chapter 21. We have 2 readings here that'll complete us for today. We'll begin with Trisha. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Trisha, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Trisha takes us into chapter 21 and reads verses 1 through 9.
When anyone is found slain, laying in the field in the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you to possess, and it is not known who struck him, then your elders and your judges should go out. They shall measure the distance from the slain man to the cities around about, and it shall be that the elders of the city nearest to the slain man shall take a heifer, which has not been worked and which has not pulled with a yoke. And the elders of that city shall bring the heifer down to a wadi with flowing water, which is neither plowed nor sown, and they shall break the heifer's neck there in the wadi. And the priests, the sons of Levi, shall come near, for Yahweh your Elohim has chosen them to serve him and to bless in the name of Yahweh, and by their mouth every strife and every stroke is tied. And let the elders of that city nearest to the slain man wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken in the wadi. And they shall answer and say, our hands have not shed this blood, nor have our eyes seen it. O Yahweh, forgive your people Israel, whom you have ransomed, and do not allow innocent blood in the midst of your people Israel, and the blood guilt shall be pardoned to them. Thus you purge the guilt of innocent blood from the midst, when you do what is right in the eyes of Yahweh.
Amen. Amen. Okay, our last reader is going to be Pat. Going to take us from verse 10 to the end of the chapter. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Pat, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, verse 10 to the end of the chapter.
When you go out to fight against your enemies, and Yahweh your Elohim shall give them into your hands, you shall take them captive, and shall see among the captives a woman fair of form, and shall delight in her, and take her for your wife. Then you shall bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head, and trim her nails, and put aside the mantle of her captivity, and shall dwell in the house, and in your house, and mourn her father and her mother a month and a day. And after that you shall go into her house, and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. And it shall be, if you are not pleased with her, then you shall let her go at her desire. But you do not sell her at all for silver. Do not treat her harshly, since you have humbled her. When a man has 2 wives, one loved and the other unloved, they have borne him children, whom both the loved and the unloved. The firstborn son is of her who is unloved. Then it shall be on the day he makes his sons to inherit his possessions, he is not allowed to treat the son of the beloved wife as firstborn in the face of the son of the unloved, who is truly the firstborn. But he is to acknowledge the son of the unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him a double portion in all that he has, for he is the beginning of his strength, the right of the firstborn of his. When a man has a wayward and rebellious son who is not listening to the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and who, when they have disciplined him, does not listen to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of the city, to the gate of his city, and shall say to the elders of his city, This son of ours is wayward and rebellious. He is not listening to our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of his city shall stone him to death with stones. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. And let all Israel hear and fear. And when a man has committed a sin worthy of death, then he shall be put to death, and you shall hang him on a tree. Let his body not remain overnight on the tree of you, for you shall not certainly bury him the same day. For you shall certainly bury him the same day, for he who is hung is accursed of Elohim, so that you do not defile the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance.
Amen. Amen. All right, so that's going to conclude the reading part of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a short blessing, and then we're going to take a 5-minute break. And during that break, if you need to use the restroom, that's great. You also may want to coalesce your thoughts for questions or comments that you may want to cover from chapters 15 through 21. Okay, so for those chapters right there, you may want to go ahead and get those thoughts together so you know what you want to ask or say. So let's just close here. Father, we come before you. We have read your word. And what a blessing it is, and what a blessing it is to be a people that you would choose to give such a wonderful thing as your Torah, that the living word would be in our midst, and that it would change and transform us into the image of your Son. So, Father, we thank you, we praise you, giving you glory and honor. In the name of Yeshua, amen. Amen. Okay, 5-minute break, and then we'll continue with the discussion portion. Great. Excellent. That was smart thinking. I want sound just. So I can use it. Do you want me to use this one? I'll switch to one. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so real quickly, it has been raining very hard. It's subsiding just a little bit right this second. Of course, it was raining pretty much the hardest when we had our break. I did ask Yahweh to part the river between here and the other building. It didn't work. It was worth asking, though, you know. I just took a shot at it. Manny, can you grab me that bench? So, just some quick heads up. Some quick heads up. We do have some donated umbrellas. So if you need an umbrella in the back foyer before you leave the building, there's 6 or 7 umbrellas. You're welcome to take one and use them. One of the brethren went out to Walmart this morning to get an umbrella and realized we probably can get a bunch more, and he got all they had. So there was 6 or 7 of them, so be blessed if you need an umbrella. There's one in the back. I probably could use one, but that's okay. I don't mind getting wet. I've discovered I don't melt. Well, there you go. From years of experience, my mother telling me, you can't go out without an umbrella, and I realized, but I don't melt. Okay. So just another heads up, if you want to use the restroom, you'll probably have to go to the dining hall. The doors on the back of the dining hall that face the sukkah are unlocked now. Okay, just realize you may run into some children in there coming from the children's program. And if you see any of them trying to go out those doors, don't let them. They're supposed to be inside the building. Send them out through the doors to go back into the building. Because the dorm building over here that we're using the restrooms has a complete flood blocking it at the moment. Now, it sounds like the rain has slowed down. If that slows down a bit, that river may slow down enough to be able to cross to get to the other building. I could have if I didn't mind being up to my ankles, but I thought that was probably wisdom to not do that. Okay? All right, so let me just give a couple of quick announcements for everyone because in case we don't get an opportunity to hear it while we're all here, I will repeat these during lunch. All right, so today is Family Day, and it is also raining like crazy, and it's not expected to stop anytime soon, although it may have little spurts here and there where it does stop. But being Family Day, we were supposed to and are supposed to have a mikvah this afternoon. We may just have everybody who wants the mikvah stand outside. All right, you're looking pretty wet to me. Just stand still and you're immersed. Okay. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out because we do have safety issues. We have to see if we can get people over to where it is that we would do it. And if it's, because that's really the problem is not so much getting wet because after all, if you're going in the water, you're going to get wet. But there's supposed to also be witnesses who don't necessarily want to stand there soaking wet while you're going in the water. Okay? So maybe we just all should go in the water. No. So we're going to have to make a decision. If you had planned to do this happened to us only one other feast. This happened about 3 years ago where it rained. But here, what was worse was it rained every single day like this. and we could not do it any day. So we can try to make an adjustment to try to work it out if we can't get it done today. I know people have come to witness one. If we don't get to do that for you, I'm sorry. We have to just allow that sometimes it is what it is, okay? And it's not within our control, these kind of things, but we will make our best effort. Hugo? There's a microphone right there if you want to just grab that real quick.
The chalets have porches. There are 5, 6 chalets.
6 cabins, right.
Cabins, yeah. So people can actually stand on the porches, and it's not far from the water.
Well, but it's all going to depend on where we do the mikvah around that water. So that pond lake thing that we're going to be using is fairly large and wraps all the way around to the left towards the big log building, the lodge, the Brown Deer Lodge. So we haven't really completely locked in based on weather and everything else what would be the best place to go in. We're pretty sure it'd be near cabin 1. But if that worked out, then we could possibly use some of the porches to stand on. We'll just have to play it out. I just ask a lot of patience, and don't get mad at me. I'm not the one that made it rain. Okay? I'm not the one who made it rain. Okay, so let's see. The family day activities. A lot of those activities were planned to be inside. Now we're going to rearrange them so they can be somehow done indoors. Whether they're at the Brown Deer Lodge or over at the dining hall or here, we'll figure out ways to do some of these things in other buildings, okay? If you had trouble with your tents and you need somehow some sort of alternative housing because your tents somehow didn't maintain their waterproofness like you had hoped, or some other issue with the flooding that's going on, let Robert know, let Kurt know, one of the Shamashim know, and we will try to make alternate arrangements for that. We have some options that are coming available, but we don't just announce the options. We want them to see you or Robert to make arrangements.
I just want to say I have extra tarps and ropes and stuff if they need them as well.
Okay, we have extra tarps and ropes over there if you see Kurt. Some other people might have some extra tarps and ropes, see them. But if you do need to come indoors, we may be able to work that out. See Robert or Kurt. If you come to see me, I'm going to send you to them anyway. So I'm not saying you can't come to me, but just know that if it's about your housing, I'm going to redirect you to them because they've got that, sort of handled and they know what to do. Okay. So hopefully that does cover it. For the announcements, well, you will have more announcements during lunch. Okay? I think that should do it. So, okay, so this is the fun part, the exciting part, the part you've all been waiting for. We get to discuss what we just read. Starting with Deuteronomy chapter 15 and working our way through chapter 21. So just a reminder of how this works. Because some people may be new on the live stream. How many do we have on there? Did we manage to get some on there? Because I know our live stream's been acting very erratic. About 73, okay. Well, that's pretty good, 73 computers. It's not like we normally get on Shabbat when we get 400, but hey, we're reaching some people that are isolated, because a lot of the ones from the 400 hopefully found feast sites to go to. All right. Actually, a lot of them are here. They're you. I was sitting there going, why is the number so low? And then my wife said, because they're here. They're not home anymore. That's why the live stream number. How many of you live stream normally? Almost everybody in the room. That explains everything. There you go. Okay. There's the answer. I knew there was an answer. All right. So quick reminder how we do this. We have 2 microphones. Mandy's got one. Dawid's got the other on different sides of the room. You can raise your hand. We'll bring you the mic. If a question has been posed, anybody is welcome to jump in with an opportunity to share an answer or discuss the point. This is not all being necessarily directed at me. I will moderate and hopefully keep it peaceful and going in the right direction. And where needed, I'll step in and share my thoughts on things. If you are wanting to share something that's a different topic than the one already being discussed, we may skip you until we have everybody who wants to get in on that particular topic handled first, and then you will be next. So don't feel bad if we somehow looks like we skipped you. We didn't. We're going to make sure first if you're talking about the same issue, because we may have 4 or 5 people that want to jump in on a particular thing that gets discussed. Okay, some things may be a lot quicker, one person, one thing, and that's it. All right, if you're on the live stream, Kurt, who's got the live? You got the live stream? Okay, so then if you have questions or comments, you can type them in, and Kurt is manning the live stream as well. Okay, we're going to begin with Dale. Dale, go ahead.
Steve, just wanted to ask about 15:22. It says, eat within your gates the unclean and the clean alike as the gazelle and as the deer. My question is, if you're touching something unclean, doesn't that make you unclean?
Okay, so we covered this partially. We didn't cover that specific part yesterday, okay? So that's a good question. The question is in several places here in a couple of chapters in the middle of Deuteronomy, it mentions the unclean and the clean alike shall eat of it. So we're talking about, in this particular case, your status as being unclean or clean doesn't prevent you from eating of this thing, okay? So yes, touching things would make you unclean. Of course, the deer and the gazelle are both clean. But the thing is, if you had done something that made you unclean, whatever it was, some things you're not allowed to participate in until you go through the process of becoming clean. Hebrew would be tameh and tahor, unclean and clean. Tameh is unclean, tahor is clean. So what the Deuteronomy instruction is saying is that in this particular issue, okay, when it's talking about verse 19, okay, it says, set apart to Yahweh your Elohim all the firstborn males and come from your herd, and from your flock. Do not work with the firstborn of your herd, nor shear the firstborn of your flock. You and your household are to eat it before Yahweh. So this thing that's being discussed here, that you are to eat, he's saying it's okay to eat it if your state, your status is called unclean. Maybe you had a dead animal on your property earlier that day and you had to move it. Now you're unclean, but you can still eat of this. There are other places where it says you must be clean or you cannot participate. So the clarification in this case is that this situation that he's talking about here, it doesn't matter whether you personally at that moment are clean or unclean, you can eat it. Okay? All right. Next question. Okay, in the back we got Richard.
Yes, I have the question for chapter 15, verse 17. Then take an awl and pierce it through his ear right into the door. What's the significance of the owl? And does this guy ever get off the door?
He's stuck there forever. He's stuck there forever. Okay. One of the things we talked about on the first day before we started doing this is that we have to first agree to what a verse says, and then we are free and open to discuss what we think it means. Well, the verse simply says, and it shall be when he says to you, who's the he? It says the slave who wants to stay. Okay, so when he, the slave, it says, I do not want to go away from you because he loves you and your house because it's good for him and with you, good for him with you, then you shall take an awl and thrust it through his ear to the door, and he shall be a servant forever. Do the same to your female servant. So, okay, so it just tells us this is the mechanical instruction. He wants to stay, so you go and take him by the post and you put a pierce through his ear. Of course, that marks him as someone who has chosen to stay. So when anybody would have seen him as a slave in your house, they would understand that this is someone who has voluntarily chosen to stay. That would include beyond the Shemitah release, beyond the Jubilee release. So it was an identifier. We can also speculate that what was also supposed to be on the doorposts? The Torah. So this is one that also maybe to some degree is saying, I'm going to be a part of your house and be under the submission and under the instructions that you're under, which is the Torah. So because now we're bringing him to that same place, that doorpost, and putting the hole through his ears. We're also shedding blood with the Torah, with the doorpost. This also kind of points towards Mashiach, towards Messiah. So there's a lot of things we can speculate there. They're all our educated guesses, hopefully. So we don't really know. But for certain, mechanically, it helped to identify that slave as being one who has voluntarily decided to stay. But there's also a high level of commitment here. It's not like he said, I think for the next year I'd like to stay. No, either you're going to stay or you're not going to stay. This is a serious commitment. You're going to commit to it. We're going to take you over here and take an awl and put a hole in your ear, and that's going to be a permanent sign that you chose to stay. Is that making some sense? Okay, next question. Okay, we got one back there, and then we have Arthur had his hand up here. Hugo, go ahead.
Chapter 15, verses 1 and 2, about the release of debts. Yes, this is speaking to the one who is lending to others. But elsewhere, doesn't it say that those who borrow should not borrow and put the lender at a disadvantage? So my question is, how do we deal with this commandment and related ones when it comes to mortgages, multi-year mortgages longer than 7 years, and then also with an eye to, when Messiah arrives and mortgages and loans we might have at that point. How do we deal with that?
Okay, anybody want to say anything about that? Okay, Nate's got his hand up. Bring him the mic. Well, one of you needs to go to Nate. You can't both come this way.
Mortgages have always been a thing, because you think about where we're at with not wanting to be slaves to the system, and it's always been something that Yahweh has never really allowed us to enter into as far as a mortgage is concerned, and anytime we have, it just blew up in our face. Recently, Abba opened up for us to be able to purchase our house outright. We have 5 acres up in New York State. And the total of the house, it went on the market for $30,000. We were praying about it. It was a foreclosure house. We got, to make a long story short, we got it for $13,000. We paid for it outright. So there are ways to avoid getting into a mortgage or extended. We just had to look for, Abba, where is this that we can purchase a property outright and not have to go into debt or slavery to the system? We had to do some work to it, but it's ours. We may have to pay taxes on it, but I don't have to pay, a mortgage for 7 years.
All right.
So, long story short, Abba does provide a way. You just have to look for it.
All right. Anybody else on this question before I answer it? Kurt, yes or no? Same verses, same, a different question. Okay, so give me it, I'll answer both at the same time.
All right.
I have the technology, I can do that.
The question is, how does the release exactly go? And then does anyone have an idea when the sabbatical comes from?
When
the sabbatical comes from.
Okay.
Basically, when is it?
All right. See, that's easy for me to add those two together. Okay. Let's go back to what we talked about the other day. All right. Context, context, context when it comes to law is what? Jurisdiction. Okay, so you have to ask questions like, who's the law apply to? Who is it that gets to apply the law? How does it get applied, etc.? You have to have all these questions answered. So verse 1 and 2 of chapter 15, is that for the nations? No. Is it for the cohesive nation of Israel when they're in the land? Yes. Is it for the scattered nation of Israel all over the world? No, because there's no way to implement it. Because we're going to find out by Deuteronomy 17 and across the ways, when it talks about when there's judgment done, you need to do what the judgment is. You have to be in a place where that system of judgment can actually be implemented. So to answer Hugo's question first, it doesn't apply to us now at all from the point of view of things like us interacting with people that are not in the body. What we can do is if somebody in the body wants to borrow from you, or you are interacting or lending an item, because it has to do with items too, not, you give somebody something, etc., then you can then apply this understanding about returning things after the period of time. However, it then goes to the question from the online person, which is, well, when exactly is the Shemitah, or the year of release? And the answer is, we don't have the slightest idea. We have people that think they do, that are guessing, that will absolutely lay down their life thinking they've got it right, but we really don't know. And it doesn't matter if you got it right. What matters is that you have to have the whole nation having it right, with then a system where you can go before authorities to implement. Because what if somebody doesn't do it and they're supposed to do it, then what do? You have to go to an authority to have them render judgment to deal with the issue not being handled right. Does it make sense? Okay, so we have none of that right now. So we have to learn these things so that we're ready for it, because that is how the millennial will work. That is how things will be when they're going to put straight and the regathering is complete and we are actually a nation again. Because this is the way he wanted the world to behave. So hopefully, Hugo, that answer your question? Okay, and hopefully for the live stream person as well. All right, so It's not so much of trying to figure out, well, if I got a 30-year mortgage, how does that all work? Well, we're not dealing with that here. Because in this system, you would never do anything more than 7 years. And if it's already during the 7-year cycle, you would do something less than 7 years. And there's instruction that we read that says, hey, don't decide not to lend to your brother just because you know the year of release is right coming soon. I mean, if you need to help your brother, help your brother. And don't be thinking, yeah, but. Don't be the yeah, but. Abba gave you all you have anyway. That's the key. All right? He's trying to get you to think like him. Let me let that sink in for a second. Because you want, and you want it now, and you've only turned yourself around and gotten sort of straight 5 minutes ago. I'm saying. And yet you want him to treat you in a certain way. Why don't we treat others like we want him to treat us? That's kind of like the do unto others thing. So instead of saying you should love your neighbor as yourself, you really should love your neighbor as he would love your neighbor. Do unto others as he would do unto them, not how you would. Because listen, when it says, do unto others as you would have done unto you, well, some of you are not nice to yourself. So why would you want to do unto others what you would want done to you? Do unto others what you would want him to do or how he would do it. It's that kind of thing. So hopefully that answers the question for the year of release. Arthur.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on what Dale had asked on the eating the when you're clean and unclean. If we go to 15:19, it says set apart to Yahweh, and it tells exactly what kind of a condition the animal should be in, and that you eat it before Yahweh. Now, in verse 21, basically it says if it has a defect or whatever, you can still slaughter it, but not to Yahweh. You would just eat it as normal food, like you would deer or gazelle, which you wouldn't slaughter to Yahweh. You would just eat it as normal food in your home.
Exactly. Okay, so that's sort of another way of saying, again, sometimes it's good to have the same thing said, slightly different wording. Hopefully it takes, for a few people, a light bulb will go off differently so they can understand. Well said, Arthur. Thank you. All right. Next question. Okay, Jeff?
It has nothing to do with this. You said something earlier that you don't know what the Shemitah year is. Why don't we know?
Okay, we don't know when the Shemitah year is because the cohesive nation that was keeping track of it, okay, was put out, scattered, and done away with at a time where we don't have the records to give us the exact timing. So we have to go through biblical, like what we have in the biblical record, whatever we might possibly get out of Josephus or something, and try to piece it together. But we don't have any exact record late enough to say this was the last official, because you know what? They did these things and they didn't always record it. It was just something they always did and they always did. And there's also a reason why it says that you shall declare, Leviticus 25, you will declare the year of release. So it was something that people would need somebody to go out there and declare it. This is it. I know you might have not kept good count, but here it is, okay? So because we don't have a good, clear record with strong dates to know when they were, because we may be in the 4th year of the such and such of the reign and so. Okay, when was that? On the 4th year of his reign. So it's hard to keep track of things. You know, when we do dates, another part of it makes it tough is that when they go back and count, I don't know if you're aware of this, some of you, this might be a very interesting thought, but when they announce that so-and-so became king, there's a difference between when they were announced as king and when they actually started to reign as king. That could be 2 different years completely, or even 3 or 4 years later. The father or the king may have already officially declared the next king, and so that's worded differently in Scripture, and it's very hard to know when you're counting that the reign was from this year to that year, or from this time to that time, whether that's when they was announced as king or when he actually started as king, because there's slightly different wordings and it's slightly different things. Okay, because a king would often make it clear who the next one would be, so there would be no fighting, so that would be settled in case something happened to him. And so this again messes with our following and tracking the calendar of counting years, because even if we look at the biblical record, it's hard to know. Okay, now it's one thing when we say, and this one was born and then lived this many years, and this one was born. And then you start tracking as best you can that way, and hopefully you're not off by too many years because of one being born at the end of a year or the beginning of a year, how that all works. But when we start dealing with counting things because we only have a record of kings, because in the beginning of the genealogies we have a record of births and deaths. Later on in 1st and 2nd Samuel and in Kings and Chronicles, all we have is a record of kings. And that gets a little bit more tricky to count years. So it's a good question. But the reason we don't have it is because Israel messed up and is no longer in the land as a cohesive nation like they were supposed to be. And then we would know. All right, who's next? Okay. And by the way, for all of you on live stream who are wondering, what in the world weather are you having? Rabbis in shorts and a T-shirt. 5 people got up there in sweatshirts and long pants. Is it hot? Is it cold? I'm not going to answer the question. I'll keep you guessing. Okay. It's raining, which makes it feel cold, but it's warm. I mean, the weather is actually a warm temperature. Okay? Dawn, go ahead.
15:4 and 15:11 just kind of threw me off a little bit. That says there will be no poor among you. And then 15:11 says there will always be poor among you. So will there be poor or not?
Okay. Everybody throw out your Bibles. It's contradictory. It's no good. All right. Look at verse 4. So verse 4 is trying to say there should be no poor. There should be. But when you get to verse 11, he says, because the poor one does not cease from the land, all these things that came before, he says, this is because the poor doesn't cease. There shouldn't be any poor. If you did things right, if we were all doing what we're supposed to, there would not be any poor. But because we don't, and there's enough people that don't, there will always be poor. Not that the poor are poor because they're not doing. Let's be clear. The poor are poor a lot of times so that others can learn to be generous, to be Yahweh-like, to be giving, to be providing, to be caring. They got in trouble almost equally as much for breaking Sabbath and breaking feasts as for not taking care of the poor. When you heard the prophets speak all the time, you did not take care of the poor. It's part of their scolding from above. So the not ceasing has to do with our heart issue. I'm going to let there always be poor. It's kind of like, remember the man that Yeshua healed, and they said, well, is he all messed up because of his sin or his parents' sin? And Yeshua said, neither. He's been allowed to be this way for this moment so I can heal him. That's why he's this way. So poor are not always, sometimes they're poor because of their own consequences that they created for themselves, but not always. So I don't want everybody to look down at poor people and think, well, you're poor because you're sinning. No. A lot of the prophets wondered, why do the wicked seem to prosper? So apparently, sinning doesn't always cause poverty. But poverty is being allowed so that those of us that have would think like him and provide for them. Does that make any sense? So it's about a heart issue. Okay, so did I answer your question? Okay. Tricia?
So with that understanding, you've got your third tie, which is the benevolence for the poor. So is that benevolence, can an individual use that benevolence to help the poor, or does that have to be submitted to leadership so the leadership makes that decision with the benevolence? Help us understand how to help the poor.
Okay. So when you're dealing with the third tithe, we talked about this yesterday. So as far as mentioning the third tithe, we didn't talk about this particularly, although we did somewhat. You do not have to give this to the Levite, the storehouse, so to speak. You can use this to give to the poor as you see. The thing is that you may not be very well qualified on how to discern who's a poor and who's a sponge. Who's a poor and who you're enabling or who you're entitling. So it may be that you should, before you do it, at least get counsel from leadership who has more experience already owning the T-shirt of giving money to people they shouldn't have. Because we all have done that. If you've ever been in that position, you've been taken for a ride, you've enabled somebody, you've made all the mistakes. And so hopefully you'll make less of them and have some wisdom to give someone else before they just give. See, a lot of you have really huge hearts. And it's not a difficult thing to get you to give to somebody who looks like they need. And you are just like a big target saying, come here, I will give it to you. And so that's good for those that really do need. That you're going to be taken advantage of by everybody that's just being a sponge. That needs somebody to say, no, let's fix your problem and not just throw money at it. So leadership has the opportunity to first find out why you need. Why is it you don't have? And it may be that there's nothing they really could have done about it. Absolutely, we take care of them. It could be that they absolutely have an emergency, but it's fixable, that we may help them short term with the emergency as long as they agree to work on the problem to fix it. Some people can't fix it. They have physical conditions. They've got whatever it is that does not allow them to make a whole, they can't get a job. They are on some sort of benevolence already from the government or whatever. But there are people that are able-bodied enough, but for whatever reason, nobody's ever helped them to figure out how to be self-sustaining. And so leadership can help with that. So good question. Okay, good question. Well, one of the things that we want to do is in verse 9 is use verse 9 to help us with our heart, which says, be on guard lest there be a thought, and this is a thing, he calls it a thought of Belial in your heart, saying, well, the 7th year, the release is coming, and your evil eye, or your eye is evil against your brother, and you give him nothing. And evil eye, or eye being evil, has to do with greediness, generally, okay? It says, well, I don't want to give to him. I'm going to hold on to my stuff, because after all, the year of release is right here. I want to address this in a slightly different angle. I want you to be aware of the mindset problem in all areas. Well, we can reverse it and say, well, I don't have to fix everything right now because he's not coming tomorrow. See how you can turn it the other way around? I mean, after all, I've got time. Well, how do you know that? You don't know that. Any of you know anybody that passed away and nobody saw it coming? It was a surprise to everybody around. Look at that, almost every hand. So why do you think you're exempt from that? It could happen to you. So why not fix it now? Work on it now. What are you putting it off for? So I could look at that verse from both directions. You could be looking at it from, well, it's coming like tomorrow, so why should I do this? By the way, let's take it from that point of view. If you've been buying into September 23rd, by the way, welcome to the post-apocalypse. Since it's now October. Okay? I did tell you nothing would happen, didn't I? We've all been left behind, which is good. Everybody read Proverbs 2? Does everybody know what I'm talking about? Let's read it real quickly. The last 2 verses of Proverbs 2, where it says, the straight shall dwell in the earth, and the perfect be left in it, but the wrong are cut off from the earth, and they're taken away. The treacherous ones are plucked out of it. See, they've got it all backwards. You want to be left behind. At least that's what Proverbs says. He says in verse 20, so walk in the ways of goodness and guard the paths of righteousness, for the straight will dwell in the earth, and the perfect be left in it, and the treacherous ones are plucked out. The wrong are cut off. Oh, that's a whole opposite thing. Somebody called Tim LaHaye. He's going to have to rewrite his books. All right? So that was an interesting thought that was there. But now, look, when we're looking at these things in Deuteronomy 18, because a lot of you have been hyped by the fear-mongering, overzealously excited sign watchers. I'm not saying anything against sign watching, but boy, if you're going to go ahead and get everybody hyped up to think that somehow it means that he's coming tomorrow or on a particular date, how many of you fell into, you don't have to raise your hand, I don't want to embarrass you, but you can if you want. How many of you fell into all of the hype about one of the many different asteroids/meteors that was sort of heading in this direction? How many of you fell into the hype of, let's see, what was it called when it changed into the millennium? The Y2K. How many of you fell into all of that craziness? Okay. How many of you fell into the blood moons? Any of the 5 or 6 times that's happened? Okay. In your lifetime. How many of you got caught up in 9/23, September 23rd? See, you get caught up in these things because, A, you don't understand Scripture well enough. I hate to say it that way, but if you understand Scripture well enough, you would know other things would have had to happen that didn't happen in that area before those things were so supposed to be, that there wasn't time for that. Okay? So just keep that in mind. So when I told you confidently that nothing that people were, I didn't say nothing at all would happen, but nothing of this biblical proportions was going to happen on September 23rd or with the blood moons because other things still had to happen first. That didn't mean nothing would happen. We would just observe and see if anything happened. But it wasn't going to be the return of Messiah or some other thing like that because there were too many other check boxes that we were missing. That, as the Scripture says, has to happen first. And they had not happened yet. And they still haven't happened yet. But let's bear in mind, and this is interesting, because Deuteronomy 18 talks about a false prophet. Let's first define prophet so that we're not limiting it to what maybe you might think of it being like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, that kind of thing. What's a prophet by definition? Come on, I've taught you guys this. Speaks the word of Yahweh with authority, or at least they appear to have authority. Okay, speaking the word with authority. This is what Moses was doing. And then it was taken, that spirit on Moses, right, was then shared with the 70. And what did the 70 immediately start doing? Prophesying. What were they doing? They were doing what Moses had been doing. Okay? Now, Joshua got all jealous because they were doing what only Moses had done that previously. They weren't doing anything new called prophecy and speaking the future, whatever anybody thinks prophecy means. They were simply doing what Moses had been doing, and Joshua thought only Moses should be doing it. And Moses said, no, I wish you'd all do it. I wish you all could know the word well enough that you could speak it with authority. Okay? So when somebody is in a teaching role, in a leadership role, and they're claiming this or that is going to happen on a specific date because of a specific event, I believe it falls into this category, where they are claiming to be in that prophecy role. And it says here, when you say in your heart, how do we know that the word which Yahweh was not spoken? He said, look, he said, and let's go to verse 19. And it shall be when a man who does not listen to my words, and he speaks in my name, though, these are people claiming to be speaking the authority of Yahweh, I required of him. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded to speak, or speaks in the name of other mighty ones, even that prophet shall die. And when you say in your heart, how do we know? How do we know which is which? That's a good question, isn't it? We've got a lot of people out there claiming to be prophets. They even have business cards that say it. I'm a prophet. Some of them are multiple things. They're evangelist, prophet, apostle, whatever. Looks good on a card, I suppose. Okay? He says, and when you say, how do we know? What does he say? When the prophet speaks in the authority of Yahweh and the word doesn't happen and comes not, that is the word which Yahweh has not spoken. That prophet has spoken it presumptuously. Do not be afraid of him. So my question to all of you, and I get accused of this all the time, and I'm going to try to be as clear as I can. Number one, I am not trying to end or destroy anybody else's ministry. They've done it to themselves. Just make sure you understand me. Number two, I'm not doing this to make mine any bigger. I don't care how big or small this is. It's up to him, and if he wants to end it all tomorrow, I'll go get a regular job. Had him before, I can get another one. I'm not afraid of that. But I want to understand is why you are still listening to these people. Because I don't get it. Oh, but understand, Rabbi, that he was so critical in my growth when I came in. So what? Where does it say, do all of this unless it was somebody you really like and was important to you at one point in your life? Is that verse in there anywhere? I mean, I really don't get it. There are, I would say, half of the bigger name people that you find all over YouTube have hyped one or more of these things in the last 2 years. Or maybe actually in each of the last 2 or 3 years, a different thing. And some of you are still listening to these people. And I don't get it. Now, we don't have the jurisdiction to take them out and kill them. It says that prophet shall die. We don't have the nation or the judicial system to do that. The judging system to do that. But certainly you can avoid them. Does this make any sense? Oh, but you don't understand. I love this guy, and he's so good. And I agree with you. They are charismatic, meaning they're people that have a certain amount of charisma. You can enjoy them. You like them. They do know a lot about Torah. If they didn't, nobody would be listening to them. But once they've named dates, and some of them have done it 16, 17 times. And by the way, anybody hear me do the Diet Coke? None of you? I did it the other day on a teaching. You don't remember this on one of the calendar things? Okay. This is my Diet Coke theory. All right? Some of you know what this is like. You walk into McDonald's, you order 2 Big Macs, a big large fries, and a Diet Coke. Because that makes it all better. That wipes out all the calories and the bad stuff, even though the Diet Coke's worse than the other stuff. You can't go through a teaching, make absolutely clear that you believe something's going to happen, and at the very end go, oh, but now I'm not naming dates. Really? Everybody that listened to you thought you were. That's what I call a Diet Coke at the end of it. Some of these guys throw the Diet Coke on, but you know what? Some of you have made very important, life-changing decisions because you believed what they said. So apparently you didn't catch the Diet Coke at the end. So don't because I've had people argue with me, oh, but he said he wasn't naming dates. But everything he did was name dates. If I walk up to you, smack you right in the face and say, I didn't smack you, what are you going to believe, what I did or what I said? I mean, that's about how stupid it is to me. This is just me. I'm going to convince you for an hour about something, and at the end go, oh, but by the way, forget everything I just said for an hour. I'm not naming dates or anything. And that's what they'll do. But if you're watching, they are making every effort to convince you that it's going to happen. That's why you've bought into it in the past. So my question again is, and I've talked to some of these guys, and I've told them, stop! Share what you want to share, but make sure you're not causing fear, stirring people up, and naming dates so people have an expectation that something is absolutely going to happen on those dates or when that event happens. Because you're risking Deuteronomy 18. I have actually spoken to some and asked them, please, I'm not naming names today. I've done it in the past. People don't like when I do that, so I won't. I probably should, but I won't. But you know, I don't need to name the names. You know who these people are. And by the way, they made thousands and thousands, if not millions, selling their DVDs and their books on these things. Hyping up Shemitah, Jubilee, blood moons, whatever it is. And so, why are you still listening? That's all I want. I don't get it. Who's got a mic that wants to talk about this particular thing? Patricia, go ahead.
Thank you. To dissect your words of saying, why do we do this, I want to add into the whole spirit world of which I come from, walking, listening, saying that I am hearing God, and it's leading me and directing me, and going up a few scriptures to the divinations and the sorcery and the magic, understanding Christianity and the divination world, and being led by the quote-unquote spirit of that directs that we feel guided into hearing these teachers and then listening to it. Would you, after your teaching from yesterday of Yahweh, obeying his commands is submitting to the leadership. So having our minds being renewed to what we are supposed to listen to, which is the counsel of our prophet, of our teacher, to help stop the divination spirits that keep directing us and trying to pull us away from his truth. Would you comment on that type of understanding?
Well, it's a world that I've never experienced. I know you have, and I know others I've counseled have experienced this. And so they probably understood exactly what you were talking about in a way that if I said more, I would not necessarily be qualified to say more. But just realize that there are there is a spirit realm that would draw you towards these things, because that realm works in we can tell you what's going to happen. We can predict your future. That's the whole point of the witchcraft and the spiritists and all that stuff with their, using leaves and crystal balls or whatever little mumbo jumbo they're using to try to claim they're showing you the future, or just a human being saying, I've got a gift or talent. I'm hearing the voice of Yahweh. I'm hearing the Father's voice, and this is what it's saying. Lots of people out there doing that. We got to be really, 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 really careful with that. Look, I'm going to ask you a very simple question. If I gave you two, we'll call them packages of information. What, she needs the keys? They're over there. Sorry, my wife needs a set of keys. Right there. All right. Those are only the keys to the Bluff House, though. Is that what she needs? Oh, for the van. Okay, those are definitely the keys to the van. All right. So, you know what? Wait, hold on a second. Okay. I thought I had a spare set that only has the van keys, because that has other keys I might need for other things here. All right, anyway. If I had two packages, two programs that you could go through, like information, like a course. Okay, if I had two courses of study, and I said you can only choose one. Course of study A is that if you go through it, you will know absolutely when everything's going to happen. Course of study B will never tell you that, but it'll tell you everything you need to be understanding so that you can be successful when it happens. Which one do you want? Oh, so then why do you pay attention to all the people selling A? You all said B. Because that's the difference. Because you focus so much attention on the course of study trying to figure out when, that you're not spending the attention you need on what's going to make you okay when it does actually happen. That's why the Father, I believe, has told me something very simple that keeps me completely out of trouble, which is tell them what they need to do and tell them if they do it, they'll be okay and where they're supposed to be when everything plays out. That's it. He said, if they do what they do, they'll be where they're supposed to be. That's the focus. And so we don't name dates. Now, occasionally I've told you that something wouldn't happen. And I also told you if I'm wrong, then you should throw me away and go follow whoever said what was going to happen. But this is important that we kind of start figuring this all out. Oh, but Rabbi, you don't understand. Oh, well, maybe it's you that doesn't understand. You're not understanding your emotional ties. We've talked about this often. Emotion is a great measuring stick and how you deal with it as to where you are in your maturity level. If you are led by your emotions, if your decisions are led by your emotions, you're not very mature. Nothing wrong with being emotional. At the right time, you should cry. You should laugh. You should be rejoicing abundantly. But if your emotions are leading the decision-making process, you will be in trouble often. Does that make any sense? Okay, because now it blinds you. Emotions will blind you, and it's their, you know how it talks about seeing the world through rose-colored glasses, or you're in love and everything just looks different because your emotions are changing the way everything looks. You're filtering everything through those emotions. When you're upset, doesn't matter what's going on, everything goes bad, everything looks bad, nothing looks good, because you're filtering through your emotions. So one of the measures of us actually growing into the fullness of maturity is when we have our emotions in its right place and we have it under control and they don't control us. So I'm not trying to talk you into being like an emotionless automaton. I want you to be abundantly emotional. I want you to rejoice. I want you to smile. I want you to be happy. I want you to be sad when that's appropriate. All the things that are in the spectrum, even angry when that's appropriate. But don't let your emotions rule the day. So you have an emotional bond to a particular teacher. That teacher oversteps a bound. You let it go. Why? Well, because I like the teacher. I've said this often. I don't care if you like me at all. Remember, I'm 87% red. It's not important to me. I really do want you to like me, don't get me wrong. But it's not that important. What's important is that I have achieved the task goal, the result, which is getting you safely from here into the kingdom. And if I do that, ruffling a few feathers, I'm happy with that. But if I make you happy and you don't get in, that's not going to work. So whether you like me or not is not my critical, that's not important to me. All I care about is that you get from where you are there. And so I think it's important that you reevaluate some of these teachers, because that's going to cause you some problems. And here's verses that talk about it. Very specifically, when they said something and it doesn't happen, Yahweh didn't give it to them. Well, I just felt like the Ruach had led me. How many of them all say that? The Ruach has given it to me, the Spirit gave it to me, the Father gave it to me, I got this insight. By the way, if you've been around long enough, I can tell you that this is not new stuff. Do you know that the whole blood moon thing went around in 2001? Before Bilt's ever heard of it? I know another guy that wrote a book about the blood moons that were happening then in the late 90s into 2000. And he never has been heard from again because nothing happened. What he thought it would bring in the millennium, it would bring the return of Yeshua, and that's 17, 18 years ago. And guess what? He was wrong. And so why put yourself out there? Eventually one of them's going to be right. But so what? If they're wrong, you need to adjust it. I'm sorry. It's just this stuff really concerns me as to where you're getting fed. Okay? It just concerns me. That's my protective nature as a shepherd. All right. Anybody else on this topic? Okay, Nate, go ahead.
First, I want to thank you, Rabbi, for you probably don't remember, but last Sukkot I asked you an eschatology question. We were still getting to know each other, and you kind of gently put me in my place, gently, about I'm not here to help with all of that. My main focus, as far as you saying, was to help you get from point A to point B, and that's what Abba has placed me here to do. And you've been very consistent in that, and I really appreciate that, because it helps me to come to a place, because I like that stuff. I like to look into that. I want to be investigative, but you're right. We have to do what we're supposed to do in order to get to where we need to go, and that the rest of the stuff will fall into place. My question is concerning the false prophets, those speaking Yahweh's word or claiming to speak Yahweh's word with authority. Some of those are real easy to figure out. And in our home, if I think that somebody is somewhat Torah observant, we may listen to them. But once I hear that other prophet's name come up, that is not Yeshua, I'm already thinking that needs to go. So would you comment on those who are Messianic or so much that are maybe got one foot still in with where they used to be, and also trying to be, they're trying to, because they're nice people, they're good people, there are a lot of good folks that are in that camp.
I have no issue whatsoever that some of these people are probably the nicest people around. I know some of them personally and like them very much.
Okay, and then but then they want to be over here with Torah observance, but they're still dabbling with, oh yeah, but we can say that name and we can go fellowship and come into worship with that.
Okay, I see the part you're trying to get to.
Is one more? Is it just as bad, or is it even worse that this might be helping to lead others out of really committing to Torah observance?
Okay, so. Let me make sure I want to word this right. Okay, so where I think that Nate's going, for those of you that listen to Beware False Prophets, he's talking about the difference between the way we understand Yeshua and the way mainstream Christianity portrays Jesus. And so if a teacher is using the J name as opposed to the Yeshua name, how that is then perceived and how it's handled. I'll make it a little simpler. Do you really believe that the Father is going to use to get his people, his children, the covenanted people that are scattered and isolated, being regathered, the truth they need, coming out of someone who's eating pork and keeping Christmas and Easter and worshiping on Sunday and all that other stuff. So then why are we still going to those people for anything? Oh, but their teaching on marriage is so good. Oh, their teaching on this is so good. By whose standards? Can't you find anybody who teaches Torah that teaches any of that stuff? I can. And then the other side of it is there are those that are using maybe appropriate or more appropriate names and stuff, and they still have the mainstream filters going through their teachings. You listen to them, and they're still Baptist, Methodist, Charismatic, Adventist, whatever they are, they are. And you hear it through what they're saying. Catholic, I mean, I don't know all the Lutheran, Methodist, I mean, whatever they are, you'll hear it. Okay? I can name the names and you would know it. If I named a certain name, you would know, absolutely. I still hear the Charismatic coming out of that one. Another big name guy, you can hear the Baptist coming out of him. Okay? And so we have to clean through and filter through all these things as best we can. It's not easy, especially when you're new. But now you're learning, and as you're learning, you should learn how to apply. But we have to be careful with those claiming to be prophets, those claiming insight, and see what they say and where it plays out, and is it consistent and held. This has to be primary. Above everything they're writing in their books, everything they're saying and doing has got to be, this has to be above all. And if they do anything or say anything, or not so much do, none of us is perfect, but if they say anything or teach anything not in line with this, there is a problem. There is a problem. And if they say something's going to happen and it doesn't happen, there it is in Deuteronomy 18. So let's be really careful with that, because we have whole movements out there that are just, that's their focus. Eschatology, I'll tell you about eschatology. You may or may not know this about me, okay? And this is not bragging. I've got a relatively high genius IQ. IQ has to do with how you see puzzles and perceive things more than anything else. Doesn't mean I'm very smart necessarily, but I can see and put things together in a certain way. I love puzzles. The reason I'm able to do what I do with the scriptures is this is the biggest puzzle in existence. Okay? I mean, I, for fun, will take a 1,000-piece puzzle, and I can do that in about 8 hours. Okay? Just sit there and put it all together. I could, this freaks my wife out. I can sit across the table, tell her to grab a piece, and go put it over there, and it will fit. Or tell her the piece in her hand won't fit before she even tries it. Not a very useful talent necessarily, but it helps me put the scriptures together. But do you understand how much fun would be for me if he would allow me to try to line up Daniel and Matthew and Revelation and try to solve that puzzle? I've been wanting to do that puzzle forever, and he has told me no. So I understand the fun and the joy you can get out of trying to figure that out. Because I believe I would love it. I don't say I believe I'll fix it, solve it, and understand, but I will immerse myself in it. If you ever see me doing a puzzle, you can't even talk, I won't even notice you. I'm zeroed in completely on the puzzle, which is probably why it works so well for me as an ADHD. It takes all of my senses to look at, analyze, remember where all pieces are, and figure that all out, that it's so all-encompassing to my mind that I can actually sit still and do it. That's the way I would be if I started looking at eschatology. So people have asked me, like, why don't you study this? Because he has told me no. Not because I don't want to. I think it would be a blast. It's a puzzle. And I watch everybody struggle with it. And in my pride and ego, we all have it, I would be convinced I could figure it out. Why? Because I figure out almost every puzzle I've ever done. Puzzles that other people struggle with. That's kind of my gifting. And so he says to me, I want you to teach him what to do. That'll all play out no matter how it plays out. Does that make any sense? So just so we have that on record, that's why I don't study it. Okay, Dale.
Rabbi, I just want to appreciate what the messages and the teaching that you're bringing, because coming out of Christianity, there are so many on the live streaming around the world that are deceived by these itching ears, seeking and searching for the next thing. Been through all that, and the body needs to hear this, and I want to thank you for that.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. And by the way, none of these guys are giving refunds for their books or their CDs and DVDs. I mean, I love the videos that were out for September 23rd and who all predicted 2 years ago. And they're all saying why they were wrong 2 years ago and why they're right this time. What are they going to do next? Now what are they going to do? They've said it twice. In the last 2 years, they've named the date, and it didn't happen. So now what? What does that leave them? Are they going to take the videos down? And those videos have literally millions of views. Look at the effect it's having on the body. Greater judgment is on the teacher. They're not afraid of that. They should be. They should be. They act like they're afraid, like if they don't warn you, somehow you're going to be in trouble. Not being warned is not the problem. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you'll be where you're supposed to be. That's the way it works. So do what you're supposed to do. Where's the mic? Dawn.
A couple comments. When you were saying keep the main thing, I know when you're riding horses, you have to keep your focus on where you want to go. If you look where you are or you look around you, you unintentionally give the horse cues and you end up going not where you want to go. So that's just a tidbit.
Okay.
My question is about more practical application, becoming like people we hang out with. How should we react to the God told me people or those that are affected with, say, lead poisoning? God led me to do something. I mean, how should...
I like that. I'm going to use that. And
I don't...
It's not stealing. I've already told you I'm just going to use that.
I just don't know how to function as an... I tend to socially be a little awkward, and I don't really know how to respond. With some practical application would be awesome to people that would say, well, God told me, God led me. Because they drop that God told me card, and I kind of don't know what to do with that.
Okay. All right. I'm going to address it from two kind of sides. I'm going to address it from the... If you were some of these people that tends to do that, I want to address that so you can understand what's going on and how you should be handling it. And I'm also going to tell you how to behave or deal with it if you're on the receiving side of it. Okay? Well, first of all, I had a lady in our congregation in Knoxville, 2000, 2001, whatever. Okay, this is a long time ago. Who every week on Shabbat came up to me, Father told me to tell you. She had taken a course on how to hear the Father's voice. Didn't know you needed to take a class on that. And it was done by a mainstream Christian person. Well, there you go. So every week she came to me, Father told me to tell you. And I would look her in the eye every week and say, he has my number. He doesn't need to work through you. Okay, so let's also understand the role of a prophet. Okay? If you are actually a prophet, God told me to tell you, that could be the teacher, and then that teacher is teaching everybody in general. When somebody goes to somebody, that was a prophet, was almost always to the leader, to the king. Now, she thought that's what she was doing with me. I said, well, what makes you think you're a prophet? Your life, I know her life. Her life was a mess. She was doing all that. I said, why would he be using you to talk to me? He can talk to me, or certainly talk to me through somebody. But this is, whatever it is that was on her mind that she wanted me to know, it was Father told me to tell you. So we have people with lead poisoning. I love that. I just feel led to do this, and I felt like I'm being led to do that. And I just feel led. That's right, get the lead out. All right. All of a sudden, we're going to have a little bit of Zeppelin playing in the background. Okay. Here's the thing. When we look at this verse in Deuteronomy 18, what is it telling you? It's telling you that when you look at the result or the fruit, you'll know the source. When you look at the fruit or the result, you'll then know what the source was. I'll give you an example. I'll give you two. The first example is a gentleman that used to be connected with us. He was a rabbi, at least he thought he was anyway. I guess I'm looking at the fruit. I don't necessarily see that, but somebody made him a rabbi. And he felt led to move to an area of Tennessee and start a congregation there from where he used to live. And I said to him, well, how is it going? Because he said that God sent him there. Father sent him there. He said, well, most weeks it's just me and my wife. I said, how long have you been there? 3 years. Yahweh didn't send you there. Yes, he did. Where's the fruit? You've been there 3 years and it's just 2 of you. I don't think that's Yahweh. I think that's you. Or you just heard something and you misunderstood it, because if it was Yahweh, there'd be fruit. Okay? I was looking for a place to put our congregation when we came back into ministry in 2011. I didn't want to go where I wanted to go, and I didn't want to not go where he wanted to go that I didn't want to go. I wanted to make sure it was about him. And so we then chose Chattanooga with the idea that we would see by the fruit if that's what he wanted to do. And today, the congregation is just alive and well and thriving, so he seems to at least be okay with that decision. Whether it was his or not, he's blessing it enough that it's working. You got to look at the fruit. You got to look at the fruit. Okay, so that's number one. I'll give you a second example. We had some people that we did benevolence for. We took them from where they were, away from where they lived, drove them all the way here so we would take care of them and that kind of thing. And the person then made some choices that were not good choices. And we had to say, well, if you're going to make these choices, why can't you just trust us to continue to take care of you? I said, look, I brought you up here. Listen, I use those words. I brought you up here. And he said, oh, you're going to steal Yahweh's blessing. No, Yahweh brought me up here. I said, the way you're behaving right now, the jury's still out. It's looking more like me right now. Because the fruit isn't showing it was him. So right now it's looking a lot more like it was me. Like I wanted to help you and I wanted to bring you up, and it wasn't him. See, you see how that example can show you? He jumped in and said, oh no, Yahweh brought me up here. Now I brought you up here. If the fruit bore it out, it would have been Yahweh leading me to bring you up here. But right now the fruit isn't looking that way. You see what I'm saying now? You got to look at the fruit. So when you ask the question, you know, well, Yahweh's leading this or Yahweh's doing that, I always say, let's wait and see. You have 3 voices in your head. We talk about this all the time. Some of you have more. Well, I'll talk separately about those people. But you got 3. The loudest one is you. That voice is loud, and by the way, it can imitate the other voices. Second voice is Hasatan's. By the way, all he's doing is cheerleading what you wanted to do anyway. The stuff that you shouldn't do, that you want to do, he's not giving you that thought. You've heard me say this before. If you haven't, you need to know this. The enemy, the devil, the adversary, Satan, whatever name you call him, did not put the thought in your head. He creates nothing in you. He only can work with what you've already got. If you don't have it, he can't work with it. Understand what I'm talking about. I give the example all the time. I have never had any issue with alcohol, so he never tries to tempt me with alcohol. If you've never had any issue with whatever it is, some sort of thing, then, like, let's say you've never had any temptation to steal anything. Well, because it's never been in you to desire to take something. Some of you have had that temptation to just take something. Why? Because there's something in you. Satan didn't give you the thought. So you got that second voice cheering on you to do the thing you shouldn't do that you want to do. Every sin you do, you wanted to do. Now, Satan encouraged you. It's kind of like in the movies, you know, little angel on one side, little devil on the other. And the devil's now, is the devil on the other side trying to convince the person to do something they didn't already want to do in any movie? No. It's always, you know you want to do this. You know you'd like to do this. That's what you really want to do. It's not giving thoughts and ideas. It's only saying, yeah, go for it. You can get away with it. It'll be okay. So that's your second voice in your head. And the third voice, the quietest voice, that still small, soft voice, is the Father's voice. And that voice is waiting for the other 2 to, quite frankly, shut up. You know me, I'm blunt. Just be quiet and let the other voice talk. The problem is the 2 other voices love to make believe they're the small, still voice, and they are very good at convincing you that they are. Especially when it encourages you to do what you want anyway. So that's when you say, I feel led. I feel led to do what I've always wanted anyway, to get my way and do what I want. The Spirit told me, Father told me. the fruit will prove it. I will always reserve judgment who's behind the thought until I see what happens. Okay? Because it could have been one of the other two. Does that make sense to everyone? So that's how you have to deal with it. Right, just say, look, I appreciate that you feel led and that you think you're feeling led. Let's see what happens. And the way you can work with that is this. You can ask them, hey, have you ever felt this way before and it turned out it wasn't of him? And if they're honest, they will say yes. Every one of you has had that. You thought it was him and it wasn't. And so say, hey, before we jump to any conclusions, claiming something's of him when it might not be really careful of claiming things are of him. Because if it's not, that's wrong. That's not a good thing. So I would encourage them to say, well, let's wait and see. The fruit will say and show if it's of him. Okay? Now, by the way, there's other verses, before we get to you, other verses that say, what if the false prophet, in chapter 13 of Deuteronomy, says something and it does happen, so the fruit looks good. Then we use the other measuring stick of, did this fruit lead you towards or away from Yahweh and Torah? Because sometimes they'll do it and it works. But where is it leading them? Is it leading them closer and more observant? Or is it leading them away? So those are your two measuring sticks. If it doesn't work, it's definitely not him. If it does work, where does it lead? That's how we know. Okay, next. Who's got the mic? Okay.
So I just wanted to make a comment. So Yeshua said that no one knows the day, date, or time of anything except for the Father. So
why are we trying to figure it out?
No one can predict anything as far as I'm concerned because he's the only one who really knows when it's going to happen.
Right.
Anything, right?
Right. Amen. But see, here's the thing. Let's look at human nature. Human nature. Okay? No one knows the date or the time. How many of you, on an unconscious or conscious level, take that as a challenge to figure it out? As soon as I told all the children, so you are also going to fall in this category because you still act like children. Don't be offended. He only calls them the children of Israel. He never calls them the adults of Israel. How many of you remember when I told all the children, do not go to the bluff without an adult, it's dangerous. And then I said, that is not a challenge. Remember that? Guess what they all did immediately? Went to the bluff. They took it as a challenge. So we have to be careful when he says no one knows. That's not a challenge to you to try to figure it out. It's for you to accept no one knows. So stop fighting about it and fussing about it and stressing about it. No one knows. So that must mean it's okay not to know. But see, we have this really deep-rooted Gnosticism in us. I got to know, especially if it's stuff other people don't know, because that's going to really make me feel alive and powerful and special, because I know stuff so other people don't know. That's why people, I really believe it's part of why people get addicted to what I call the new doctrinal understanding crack, okay? Because they get addicted to it. It's like, oh, I'm into this calendar, and I'm into this thing, and you know what? Talk to them in 6 months and see what other new thing they're into, because that wasn't enough anymore. They're onto something else. Not always, but often. They get addicted. It's a Gnostic thing. And so we got to be careful with that Gnosticism. When he says that no one knows, the Gnostic part of you says, but I got to know then. That means it's even more special. If no one knows and I figure it out, that must make me very important and special. It validates me on some level. Does that make sense? Okay? Beware of that. Because it's a trap. And if you become addicted, whatever you're into now won't be enough. You'll need to be into the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. I've known one particular teacher out there who has changed his calendar in the last 10 years 3 times. And each time he told everybody that all the other ones were wrong and this one was right. And each time he changed to one he'd already ridiculed and mocked previously. Boy, that makes him look real good, doesn't it? Be careful when you make a big stand and make a big bluster, and when you turn out to be wrong, you're going to have the proverbial egg on your face. All right, where's the mic? Okay, Josh?
So he had original comment from earlier, and I
Okay,
know we've
okay.
gone off on several tangents before, so I don't know if you want to stick to this.
I've gone off on tangents?
Well, you know what I mean.
That never happens.
Rabbi trails.
Rabbi trails, that I do all the time. Okay, go ahead and give Robert the mic, and then we'll get to Josh. Go ahead.
All right, mine goes back to the part where there should be no poor and taking care of the poor. That was in...
Put it right in your mouth.
That was in the land of Israel, is that?
That is correct.
That's correct. Now, we're not there in the land of Israel. How do we discern those standing along the road and other situations who the poor are that we are to take care of, or we can't just say, Rabbi, on the phone, call you up and say, we've got this person standing here, or dragging a dog and a family down the ditch in the highway.
Look, if you see somebody on the street, that's going to take your own personal discernment if you want to try to help them or not, and whether or not they're just basically decided to become sponges and just live off of that kind of life off the street because they just don't want to do anything. Because I've seen a few of them that look healthy enough to go get some sort of job. Okay? And I've talked to some of them, and they're mentally sound enough to get some sort of job. And you have to wonder, why are they in there? And if they're not willing to explain and sit there and talk to you, be just careful if you're just throwing money, because you're throwing money in a bottomless pit. Your money is not going to help them except for the 5 minutes it's going to help them. And so if you really want to help them, you have to actually go and sit down with them and help them. Show a true interest and genuine caring for them as people, not just, I'm just going to throw a few dollars at it and walk away and forget about them. So rather than just give them money, if you're not willing to invest the time to really go and figure out what's going on, you're not really doing anything helpful with the money. All right? Now, as far as who should you be helping, the body first. This is about, I'm not trying to be selfish, but we're supposed to take care of our own first. And there's plenty of that, trust me, that needs it, that you don't need to probably go anywhere else. Because we're not taking care of the body first. All right? And if you don't know how or who, that's when you talk to leadership for guidance. And so we talked about that, and I don't know if you were in the room. Were you in the room when we first talked about it, or did you come late? Okay, so just for that clarification, in this structure, in the we're in the dispersion, we're in the diaspora. It's going to be challenging to do the helping the poor. We got to start in the house. We help the poor in the house first, and then we can look outside. Okay. Josh?
So I just wanted to share a verse that Ray shared with me that really helped with the this desire to want to know things, this desire that leads you to want to try and figure out things that are, it's not bad to want to figure things out, but sometimes it's not the right time or it's not the right topic, and it's definitely not going to be the right topic trying to figure out the end time or when it's going to happen, but it's really short. It's Proverbs 131. Yeah, my heart has not been proud, nor have my eyes been haughty. Neither have I concerned myself with great matters, nor with those too wondrous for me have I not calmed and kept my being silent like one weaned by its mother. My being is like one weaned, O Israel, wait for Yah, now and forever. So focus on the milk, not the things that are big and mighty, marvelous wonders. And, it's not necessarily bad to go look into some of these other things, but if it's something that's really going to distract you from the milk and from the Torah, then it's not going to be, it's too marvelous, too mighty, too great things to worry about. And there are secret matters that belong to him that, aren't meant to be revealed at this time. So just a helpful thing for me there for your share.
Amen. Amen. Some of you would have been, if you were Daniel and Daniel said, he told him, seal the book, you would have casually left it near the steaming thing that might accidentally open it and, oh, oops. Well, now that it's open, I might just, and he said, seal it, leave it alone. We got to just understand there is stuff there's more than enough stuff that you need to know, that you can know, that you should know to keep you busy. Can we agree on that? There is much more than enough stuff. Look, I'm going to tell you this. And this is probably with all teachers, but I certainly just going to talk about my own stuff. If you've only listened to a teaching one time, you didn't get it. How many people can agree with me? Okay? There's too much in that 70 minutes that you go back and listen to it. There's two reasons, by the way, why. Not because you didn't listen well, but you listened where you were at that moment. And so you aren't going to catch everything. So you may want to go back and listen again, not necessarily just 2-3 times in a row. Well, that will help. But you may want to go back and listen to something a year or two later, because like I spoke to Ken about this the other day. He said, I'm going back and listening to stuff, and I'm like, how did I miss that? And I've already listened to it 2-3 times. That'll keep you busy. We've got over 300 teachings. Every one of them is about what you can take right now and use in your walk. There's no fluff. Has anybody ever heard me do a fluff teaching? Okay? So that could keep you busy if you're working with me. If you're working with others, I'm sure the same thing can apply. You will get more out of things if you listen to them more than once, and if you go back and listen to them again at another time. There's enough of that stuff to keep you busy. Okay? You don't need to go out there just looking for new stuff to keep you busy. Okay? I mean, I have people call me up all the time, and I'll turn to Robert, who sits next to me in the office, and I'm like, with all the things out there already that are a challenge, I got people that are just making stuff up to give problems. I was like, aren't there enough problems already, but you got to go find and create new ones? And people, we do that. We do that to ourselves, and we have to stop that. Okay, who has the mic? Dale.
Rabbi, can you comment on discerning of spirits? Because I ask that because I've been taught over the years to have a checklist and to actually quantify or vet where you say God spoke, the Lord told me to. I've always over the years had a bit of a checklist to actually determine whether it's me, it's those 3 or those 5 that are, as you say, and multiple. I just want to get your thoughts on that so that I can work out whether my filter's right or it's wrong, and then I can change it.
Okay, so we do have a verse that says, test the spirits, right? Well, how do you do that? Well, the first thing you do is you hold it up against Torah. If that doesn't give you a simple clarification, because often it might, okay, that's why you need a teacher. You need somebody in authority that you can go to, that you have a relationship with, that you have vetted and trust, that you can say, this is what I feel I'm being led or hearing or this is what's happening. Can you help me test it as to whether or not it's something I should be even considering? You should do this yourself first, because it may be simple enough to just look it up, compare it against the Word, and see if it's, remember the test. The first test for when you're hearing is it leading you towards or away? Is it trying to convince you to do less or more? How is it what's it about how it's teaching you about the 2 great commands? Is it going to help you love Him and help you love me and stay in obedience to Torah? Then it's probably okay. Test the Spirit from that point of view. If you're still not sure or you want to get a second opinion, so to speak, you should be calling somebody like me, whoever that person is for you. Does that answer your question? Okay. All right, who's next? Okay, Mr. Ken.
Okay, so
stand up.
I'll be blocking the camera.
No, this camera's getting you right here. Dan's getting you.
So it's not related. I'm going to go back.
Right by the mouth.
I'm going to go back a little bit here.
We don't go backwards. Sit down.
Oh.
I'm kidding.
Deuteronomy 16:16.
Yes.
So there's...
That's on my list. Thank you.
It says 3 times a year all your males appear before Yahweh your Elohim in the place where He chooses.
Right in the mouth. Right. Get it right up there.
3 times a year all your males appear before Yahweh your Elohim in the place where He chooses.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if there's a reason, because we have just shortly before that, talking about your wife and your daughter and your female servant, etc., being a part of the festival. Why would it be specifically all your males in this verse?
Okay, anybody want to jump in on that one? Deuteronomy 16:16 talks about the Shalosh Regalim, the 3 festivals where you pilgrimage. The Shalosh Regalim, which is unleavened bread, Pentecost, and booths, or we would call it Chag HaMatzot, Chag HaShavuot, and Chag HaSukkot. And it says, all your males will appear before me. Anybody have a, so you're asking, well, why just the males, right? No other hands. Okay, so I guess it goes back to me. That's fine. Okay, we got a hand in the back there. Well, give it to Nate behind you first. Nate's jumping up and down and doing jumping jacks. He's either trying to exercise or he wants the mic. Is it cold back there? You're just trying to warm up?
So have I got the mic?
All right, Dale, go ahead.
So is it because Israel was established and it had a government system that scripture plays out, as opposed to now we don't actually have that? That's why it's not required.
Okay. Nate, did you want to say something? He's like, I don't know. You already embarrassed me, and
it's okay. One of the things, this has actually been a discussion of my wife and I, is that, and she brought some attention to me that, you know, the men may end up going, but they didn't just leave their wives a lot of times, or their children. Maybe this is a question more than a statement, because they're obligated to protect their family. So is it possible that just because it just says the men, just like it says Bnei Yisrael or only the males, that they also did bring their families? What did they do with their flocks, that kind of thing, while they were going to Jerusalem? And how's that going to look for us in the millennium if we're here in the United States and Yahweh says, you know, hey, you got to come to Jerusalem, it's Sukkot?
All right, well, you actually brought up a second point in the same verse that's a little bit separate from that, and I'll cover both. All right, anybody else? Okay, so with this question, let's go back to what it says. It just says all the males are to appear, so we have to guess on the rest. But just think about the type of faith and trust you would have to have if the men all went to the place where Yahweh chose and left the women and the servants, etc., and the children behind. Think about the trust in him providing the safety for all of them while the men went to the place to keep the feast. If they went without the rest of the family. It doesn't say you can't bring the rest of the family. So if they brought the rest of the family, great. If they left some of them behind. Now bear in mind, now there's a verse. I'm going to go on a rabbi trail, so here you go. There's a verse in, it was in my notes, where is it? 16:13. Did everybody notice this? How many of you are willing to admit that you're sort of have been a calendar person? Nobody willing to admit it? Shame on you. Or proud of you, because none of you guys were ever calendar people. Well, how about this? Anybody deal with calendar people? There you go. I knew we'd get somebody. Ask all your calendar people how their calendar fixes verse 13. How their calendar accounts for that Sukkot needed to be after they finished their threshing and their wine pressing. By the way, Hillel's calendar does not account for that either. See, to me, that's a problem with all the calendars. They're not addressing the fact that it says in verse 13, keep Sukkot for 7 days after, which is kind of goes back to what you were saying, is what about the crops and this and that? Well, that should have all been done. The animals is a different thing. So you might not have your flocks was a different problem, but the crops should have been finished. It says that you're going to keep Sukkot after not only the harvest, but all of your processing. It says your threshing and your wine pressing. And so most of the people who are doing their calendars never even think about that verse. I threw that at one of the ministries out there with a calendar teaching, and they were like, oh. I said, now go back and readdress all that, and then you can talk to me about it, because I want to know how your calendar accounts for that. Because that's, see, I'm a puzzle doer. Guess what you can't do to do a puzzle? You can't leave pieces in the box. You got to use all of them. So if you're going to do something scripturally, you got to make sure you account for everything Scripture says about the subject. And so this verse says that you're going to keep Sukkot after you've done these things. Okay, so that's my little rabbi trail to the idea that you say, well, what about the crops? What about the herds? This only handles the crops. The flocks need to be handled. Okay, you can't just leave them out there and abandon them. Somebody. Now, of course, you did have hirelings, you did have servants, you did have other things that were going on that there would have been people to handle these things. Issue number 2. In the verse, it says that 3 times a year you're going to go where? Does it say Jerusalem? No, it doesn't. It says what? The place which he chooses. And he did choose Jerusalem at that time for those people. And then once he placed his name there, that's where it was. However, did he not also choose to scatter all of us? That's a place he chose for you to be. So there will likely be other places he chooses when the whole world and the whole planet is now millennially keeping feasts and stuff. He'll have places that he chooses. That's why it is appropriate for us to keep the feast here, because he chose to put us here. When he does, if he changes that back and reestablishes Jerusalem, like we see in Isaiah, then we're going to have to go to Jerusalem. Remember, it says that if you don't come and keep Sukkot and go to Jerusalem, you get the plagues. Well, at that time, that's where it's going to be. We have to see where he chooses to place. So at the moment, he's chosen to place you here. I'm not just saying that because you were born here, but because he literally scattered us and hasn't regathered us yet. So he's chosen for us to be scattered at the moment. Just another thing to think about, right? Okay, there's a hand up over here. Up here first, okay. All right, Ken, and then Dawn.
I was just going to make a comment about the spirit thing really quick. There's, I just remembered in like Ruach 7, understanding the Ruach 7 and 8, you go into a lot of detail about how to understand the spirits.
All right, thank you.
Like quite a bit.
Okay, so if you're, some of you guys know these teachings better than I do. I gave it once and you listened to it 10 times. Here's the thing. There's a teaching called Understanding the Ruach, Understanding the Spirit. It's like 8 parts. Is that how many parts? 8 parts? So he's saying that parts 7 and 8 really deal with that whole question of, discerning how to deal with spirit. So maybe that would be a good thing to go back and listen to again. Understanding the Ruach. Also about the Spirit to some degree is baptism of fire. Because baptism of fire is not what the charismatics taught you it was. Okay, so we do address it in a much lesser way in that teaching than in understanding the Ruach. Dawn. You forgot your question. Okay, we can skip you for now. Wait, she got it again.
It was actually more of a thought about, we kind of see it today. When we were dancing, there was like 3 rings of women dancing and praising, and like 1 of the men. And maybe just this is, I think, more my speculation.
Was that how that was? The lady? Well, I ended up joining over here.
Yeah, that's why we were like, woohoo!
I didn't even realize what they had done. That tells you how much I was paying attention. I was busy handling 6 things.
My speculation is that maybe the reason that he said all the men have to come is because he didn't really need to say the women needed to come, because they were kind of already there. Our heart is to already go, but men will kind of sometimes more, well, logistically, I have to stay here, I have to do this, I have to take care of this, I can't go, I'll send my family to represent for me. Right. And him saying, and that's not going to work, I want you specifically to come. Just a thought.
No, that's a good thought. Look, the main thing was that the men had to go. They needed to know that they had to go, they needed to be instructed to go so that they would go, okay? And also, you got to remember that the women, please, ladies, make sure you pay good attention. This is not disrespecting you in any way. The ladies were only accounted for in Scripture as a part of their husband or their father or a brother. They were not counted individually. They were expected to be included in a package deal, so to speak. So if the men were getting it, the men were expected to share it with the women. As a matter of fact, there's very little in Torah that's actually instructed to the women. Even the stuff about the women is instructed to the men to share with the women. That's the hierarchy of leadership. Okay? So there's an expectation if the men had to go and you're included with that man, that then maybe you would go, because that was an all-inclusive type of thing. Okay? Because now, of course, if the men would only treat their wives as a part of them and love them as their own body, etc., things would be much better. Okay? Anybody else real quick before I have to shotgun through some important pieces? Go ahead, Kurt.
Okay, Devarim 17:17. I have a question. Does Deuteronomy 17 means Yahweh doesn't really want men to have multiple wives?
Okay. That was actually on my list, and 21:15 addresses this more clearly. Okay, so let's deal with the multiple wives things. First of all, who is Deuteronomy 17:17 about? The king. All right. So the king is not to increase wives for himself. There's no number attached to that. Okay, we don't know what that actually means. But that's for the king. Well, we do have instruction in Deuteronomy 21, and in verse 15, it says that when a man has two wives. Now, what doesn't it say? It doesn't say when a man has two wives, stop, you're doing something wrong. It says if you have two wives, this is how you handle it. So let's deal with the multiple wife thing, because that's another one of those crazy things that's just taken hold all throughout the Messianic and Hebrew roots. Let's be clear. Torah has two types of commands, the do's and the don'ts. And then there's the other things that come up that there's no do or don't, but then they tell you how to handle. So guess what? There is zero instructions to have more than one wife. However, equally, there is no instruction not to. There's no do or don't. So all you ministries out there making this a huge issue, shame on you, because we should only be making a big issue out of do's and don'ts. If you choose to do something that's not a do or don't, that's something you may choose to do. But why is it coming from a microphone as if it's some important thing? If it's important, it has a do or a don't. If we want to go with the 613 commandments, well, then we've got a certain amount. We have 365 of the don'ts, and then we got 258 of the do's. Did I get that right? I think so. All right? But there actually are more don'ts than do's. So here it's telling you if, just like the beard thing. I used to have people come up to me all the time and drive me absolutely out of my mind. Because I didn't have a beard all the time. And they would go over here and show me Leviticus. Where's your beard? Where's your beard? I always had to look over at their garments and go, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Your seat aren't on. It's making me kind of deaf. No, but the thing is, there's instructions about what to do to a beard or what not to do to a beard. There's zero instructions to have one. So you don't have a do or a don't. But it says if you have one, these are the rules. So guess what? If you were in a place, in a society, where for whatever reason it was okay and appropriate to have more than one wife, here are the instructions to make sure you are respecting both. That you are not diminishing the status of the first by elevating the second. So absolutely, 100%, Scripture allows for, don't get me in trouble out there, allows for more than one wife. Just because it allows it doesn't mean you need to do it. You also live in a government in most countries that don't allow for that. That's illegal. We need to respect that. Now, if there was a Torah command that the government command interfered with, then I would say you go with Torah and risk going to jail, and that's fine. Like if the government told you couldn't keep the Sabbath. I know many people that lived in countries that now are here that had been in jail in their country for keeping Sabbath. So yes, you go and get arrested for keeping Torah if you have to. But make sure it's a Torah do or don't, not if. Don't go and get arrested for an if you choose to do this. No. The two-wife thing, multiple wife thing, we see it in several places in Scripture. It's never condemned. It never seems to work right, by the way. Anybody want to give me an example where it worked well? Not going to find it. Look at all the wives Jacob had. Oh, they had a great time. Probably Jacob wanted to go sleep in his own tent. Okay? It didn't work very good. And so let's also remember for the multiple wife issue, because this is one of the ones I marked down as one that needed to be covered, so I'll kind of just mark off that I covered it. When you see the few examples where you see it actually being initiated, who is doing the initiating? Him or her? Her? So when you look around the body today, who's yelling and screaming about wanting multiple wives? Him or her? Him. Hear that, guys? Anybody watching this video? If your wife is not initiating it, stop it. Just knock it off and forget it. Don't try to convince her. Don't twist her arm. As a matter of fact, when you see it in Scripture, the men didn't want to do this. The wives had to convince the men. Jacob got tricked into it, but then when Bilhah and Zilpah were brought into the mix, the wives are convincing the men. Okay, Sarah convinces Abraham. He didn't want to do it. So let's remember, if we're going to use Scripture, let's use Scripture. Well, Scripture says Scripture says the wife was the one initiating it. That's what I see in Scripture. So if your wife is not interested, it's over. Go on to something else. And I don't know too many ladies that are all that excited about bringing in another one. Okay? And ladies, don't be offended by what I'm going to say, but I'm going to talk to the guys for a second. Guys, and I have a wife, and I can't imagine, and I love my wife, why you'd want two. And that's not an insult on the ladies. It takes all of my attention that I can have from everything else I'm doing to provide what she needs. So it's not any fault of hers. I brought her in promising to do what I'm supposed to be as provider, protector. And it takes, I'm not even doing a great job at that. Why would I want to double it or triple it if it's hard enough to do one? So this isn't any kind of negative on the ladies. I'm just talking to the guys right now. Guys, you have enough trouble handling, treating right, pleasing, and providing and taking care of one. Why in the world would you want two? Because you're thinking not up here. You're thinking with other parts of your body. I'm just blunt and you know it. Or you're thinking somehow now you're going to break Torah, because Torah says you can't diminish the first. So you're thinking, I'm already frustrated with the first, and I'm not going to divorce, so I'm going to go get a second, and I'm going to have a good time with her. Well, you cannot do anything that diminishes the position of the first. That is in Torah. That we just read. So if you're thinking that I'm going to bring in a new model because the other one's kind of irritating me, nagging me, whatever you think she's doing, well, now you're going to diminish her position? No. You either need to man up and do the right thing, or you need to divorce if that's what you need to do, but then you have to deal with the fact that you have to have a real reason to do that. See, the men need to first man up. Don't run away and think I'm going to go get a different one. And because I'm too weak to just set her free, I'm going to go get a second one and focus on her and really hurt the first one. There's all the wrong motives going on in here. And so we got to be very careful with that. Did that answer the multiple wives question? Was that okay? All right. And ladies, I know we could do the reverse. Why would you want two husbands? Okay? Because how much attention does it take and all that hard is it to take care of one? Right? I mean, the one-on-one thing is hard. And you want to add to the mix? That doesn't seem to make any sense. I struggle enough to figure out how to do the one. And that's not Julie's fault. It's my fault. It's not easy. Anybody who's married knows it's not easy. It doesn't just work naturally. You've got to pay attention to it. It's like a plant that you buy and you take care of it. If you ignore it for a while, it dies. And we tend to do that with our spouses too. It needs to take a lot of attention, awareness, and all that other stuff. Love, care. It's hard to do that with the one. In the back, go ahead. Ariel?
I actually meant to get this out earlier. Earlier you said something about how Hasatan doesn't tempt you to do anything you don't want to do. Well, how does that inclination get there in the first place?
Okay, so now we're dealing with the idea of the Yetzer Hara, or the evil inclination. So how does it get there in the first place? I have no idea. No, I'm serious. I mean, I've wondered about this, and I have no idea. Because it's not only how did it get there, why does everybody has different ones. Okay, what I struggle with, you may look at me like, really? You struggle with that? But then what you struggle with, I might look at you and go like, really? It's not like we all go, oh yeah, I know. We're all struggling with that same thing. We're not. So I don't understand that either, right? So, but I know that with the idea that making decisions is the reason we exist, with the idea that Abba wants to see if we can actively, proactively even, focus our attention and our hearts the way he wants us to, he wants to allow us to have some things that would tempt us that we have to struggle against and have victory over. But once you have victory over it, it can literally be eliminated out. Of course, then he'll allow you to have something else to play with. Because you have to have something that constantly help you to grow. So that's the best I can think of, Ariel. I don't know why, or I mean where these things come from, except that I think he allows them to come because it's in the struggle against these things that we really grow the most. And so he allows them. Look, I think this is part of what Shaul was talking about when he said, look, there's stuff I don't want to do, but I do it. And stuff that I want to do that I just don't do because of that Yetzer Hara, that evil inclination, that struggle inside. And I've got to be fighting that battle all the time. Okay, where's the mic? Okay, Manning?
I just wanted, on 18:13, is to clarify what it means to be perfect before Yahweh.
You have a problem with that? Just don't make any mistakes. All right, 18:13. Okay? The word in the Hebrew there for perfect is tamim. Tamim. What does tamim mean? I've taught you this already. To be filled with integrity. It doesn't actually mean necessarily to be perfect, because you are not able to be perfect. If you want to be frustrated, try to be perfect, because you'll probably mess it up within the hour. We're not capable of that. What we are capable, though, of is having integrity, which means that when you're not perfect, you as fast as possible make the repentance move, make teshuvah, turn around, get back on the path. That takes integrity. So he's saying here, be filled with integrity before Yahweh your Elohim. Because look what it says earlier. I'll just make sure where I want to go with this. If you go to 18:9, the whole context here is, do not do as they do. By the way, that sounds like it would be a good teaching. Oh, wait a minute, we got that one. It's only one part. There's not much of those. Go grab it quick, there's only one part. Okay. When you come into the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving to you, do not learn to do according to the abominations of those nations, of those Gentiles, those outside the camp. That's the context going through to verse 13. Have integrity. I've told you not to mess with their stuff. Don't mess with their stuff. Don't mess with what they're doing. Don't go around seeking after, well, how do they worship their gods? And, oh, that might work over here on this side of the camp. No. Do not do as they do. So when we get to 13, after he's instructing them about not letting their daughters or sons pass through the fire, no divination, no magic, no sorcery, etc., no conjurers, no spiritists, for whoever does these things are an abomination, he says, you have integrity. I've told you, now walk it out. But when he talks about be perfect, when Yeshua says be perfect as my Father in heaven is perfect, we are not capable of that. But we can strive for it, which takes integrity. We can strive for it. Deuteronomy 8:2 is not about being perfect. He says, I want to test to prove whether you want to be perfect. Is it in your heart to keep my commands or not? Not is it that you'll keep them perfectly. What he wants to know is, does it actually bother you when you don't keep it right? If it doesn't, that's the problem. If it does, that's part of the integrity. Does that make sense? Okay. Let me cover a couple of things quick because it is now almost 1 o'clock and we're supposed to finish for lunch. And after all, yesterday we went 45 minutes over. And so we're not going to do that today. Okay. On my list really quickly. Okay, chapter 21, 18 through 21, it talks about those rebellious children that need to get stoned. And most of them are getting stoned, different kind of stoned. Everybody must get stoned. I'm sorry, I'm Bob Dylan, for those of you who don't know. Okay. I've never heard a rabbi sing Bob Dylan getting stoned. Okay. There's a first for everything. Listen, the way Moses was feeling, he was probably thinking the same thing, but he was thinking about the rocks. I said, can we just stone all of these guys? They're not listening. Okay, so let's go back to how many of you, when you started keeping Torah, went up to a friend who found out what you were doing, and your friend looked at you and said, so what are you going to do, start stoning your children now? Anybody ever hear that one? So I've heard that said to me, so what are you going to do, start stoning people now? My first thought was, yes, and we should start with you. They don't like when it actually comes out of my mouth. I usually think it's only in my head, but sometimes it comes out. Oh, did that come out loud? I'm sorry. I think it'd be a good idea to start with you. Okay, remember what we talked about with law and context. Without a nation, with a judicial system, you can't go out and stone any children. You can't stone anybody, actually. You can't actually implement the punishments of Torah without the judicial system in the right context and jurisdiction of being in the land with a cohesive nation. So in case that comes up, that was my short answer. Just let them know that, no, we don't think the law has been done away with. We just don't have a way to apply it correctly with righteous judgment in the right context. So we would be breaking Torah to do it because Torah requires it to be done in a certain framework and context. So we can't do it. All right, so that takes care of that one. Let's look at Deuteronomy 17:18. It says that the king should write a copy of the Torah. Well, what's your destiny? To be a kingdom of priests, to be kings and priests. It probably would be a good idea to go ahead and write yourself a copy of the Torah. Now, here it's an instruction. So it's not an instruction for you to do this, but you can take an instruction and say, hey, wait a minute, that might be a good thing for me to do. Because it says that when he's on the throne of his reign, he's to write it down. So it might be a good idea to do that. To go ahead, and the best way to do that is starting right when we get home, when the Torah cycle starts, write each Torah portion each week as they come around so that next year when we go through the same thing, you can go, I've got one. So I hope that all of you can commit to that. Now here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to write the Torah, not type it out in Word on your computer. There's something about reading, speaking, hearing, and physically writing that helps you remember things more. Don't worry about your penmanship. It's not about it being the best written thing that you're going to share with the public. This is your personal copy. Okay? You want a pretty one? You got one in a book already. Why would you want to go type one out on a screen? You already have one that's printed like this. You don't need another one. But here's what I'm going to recommend you do. I want you, when you do it, to read it out loud and write it. Because the more inputs we have, the more retention we have. The more you remember and retain. If you just hear me say something, it only is retained a certain amount. If you're reading it at the same time I'm saying it, you retain it even more. If you're writing notes, how many people have written notes, and even if you never went back to them, it helped you remember things better? Okay? I wrote a ton of notes in school and never, ever looked at any of them. Part of my ADHD, but I took notes because I knew in taking the notes, it was locking it in. So that's essentially what you're doing. So when you're doing your Torah portion, read the verse out loud. You're hearing it, you're speaking it, and you're writing it. And you should retain a whole lot more of it. Okay? You also are welcome at that time to write your own personal adjustments, because some of you have asked me, maybe not in this room or on live stream, but a lot of people have asked me, well, what translation do you read out of? And then when I tell them, actually, I've got an email where said, well, I thought you were reading out of the scriptures, out of the 98 scriptures, but then I listened to you and it didn't match. I'm already making my own adjustments that I've learned over the years from the Hebrew and the Greek. So this is becoming more and more my own translation. So in mine, when I see, when it gets to verse 13, I would say, be filled with integrity before Yahweh. There are places where it says, in his name, I say I'll change it to his authority. Because I understand better for myself. This is my better understanding. That doesn't mean I'm right, but that's how I understand it. So when you're writing your copy, write what you understand. Don't just take whatever translation and say you have to write it that way. If you understand something a little bit differently because of the Greek, Hebrew, what I've taught, what other teachers have taught, something that you understand, for your own understanding, go ahead and make those adjustments. Put a little footnote. Do something so you know. So here in my scriptures, I wrote the word tamim, so that when I know where it says be perfect, I had already looked up that that's what it was. Okay? Now, just a couple of things else real quick here. Go to chapter 18 and verse 5. Now, we had talked about tithing yesterday. We talked about who to give it to. You know, here's an interesting comment in verse 5. He's talking about the Levites in verse 1 who have no inheritance. We get to verse 5. It says, for Yahweh your Elohim has chosen him out of all your tribes to stand to serve in the authority of Yahweh. So the role of Levite is the person who has been chosen to stand and serve in the authority of Yahweh. That person is the one that deserves your tithes and offerings. When the Levites were there, that was them. They were the only ones. But you can see he's giving us hints of what the role looks like. The one who is chosen, that's for you to figure out, not for me to claim. The teachers who are up in front of microphones don't need to be claiming, I'm the one. No, the one who you believe is chosen of Yahweh to stand and serve you. Maybe not everybody, but you should be supported. So listen to the way he described the job. For Yahweh your Elohim has chosen him to stand, him out of all the ones to stand and serve in the name of Yahweh. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. That might help in that discussion. We covered that. Okay, in Deuteronomy 16, 10 and 16, the blessing, the offering that you give at Sukkot is based on how you've been blessed. You're supposed to, from feast to feast, look back on the time between and say, let me look at the blessings I've received. And that should then motivate how much you put in the box or how much you bring as an offering. Okay, because in Deuteronomy 16, 17 it says, but each one with a gift in his hand according to the blessing which Yahweh has given you. So when people think about what are you supposed to give? Well, this is Sukkot. What was the last pilgrimage feast? Shavuot, Pentecost. So look at your life. What has Abba done for you in the last couple of months? What does that do to your heart as far as wanting to make an offering to him? That's this type of offering. Because there are all kinds of other offerings you can make for other reasons. They're all described in Leviticus. But this one is, as you've been blessed, it should motivate you then to say, this is what I want to do in response to that. Okay, that's in verse 17, and it's also in verse 10. And you shall perform the Feast of Weeks, according to the voluntary offering from your hand, which you give to Yahweh your Elohim, blessing you. Okay? As Yahweh your Elohim blesses you. So Shavuot, it mentions that. It mentions it here again with the 16:16, mentioning all three of them. 16:17. Well, 16:16 mentions the three feasts. All right. And then the last thing, of course, which we didn't really cover, which could have taken the whole discussion, was chapter 17's discussion on leadership authority and you going to leadership. Let me just cover a couple of things very quickly because they're important. I know it's already after 1, but it's okay. Every time we've gone to the dining hall, they've not been ready anyway, so it's okay. When a matter arises, verse 8, that you don't know what to do with, let's paraphrase. Okay? And in this case, it's talking about when a matter arises that's too hard for you to judge, meaning that you've already gone to the local leadership doesn't know what to do, they start going up the chain. Well, we're going to paraphrase this for us today. When there's something that you don't know what to do, between whatever it is, then you're to go to the place that Yahweh chooses and come to the leadership of that time. And that time it was priests, Levites, and the judge. And then later on we see you could also go to the king for judgment. But here's the thing. It doesn't say to go and get advice or take an information poll. What it says is, and when you come to do this, it says, you are to do according to the word which they declare to you from that place. And you are to guard and do according to all that they instruct you. Do according to the instruction, it says here, Torah, in which they teach you, according to the right ruling which they say to you. You do not turn right or to the left of the word which they declare to you. And the man who acts arrogantly, and that's a huge problem in the body, which is why Deuteronomy 8:2 starts off with humble before proving and testing. Yahweh led you through the wilderness. Led you to the wilderness to humble you, because we need to be humbled. We have an arrogance problem, a pride problem. By the way, arrogance and pride, I got a lot of very quiet, meek-looking people who think they don't have any of that. No, you could be very introspectively, selfishly yourself and have an awful lot of arrogance and pride. Arrogance and pride does not mean someone who's loud and in everybody's face. It can look that way too. But we got to be careful we're not just pigeonholing it. Anybody with any personality style can have an arrogance problem and a pride problem. He says here, and the man who acts arrogantly is to not listen to the person who gave him the instruction, the one who serves there before Yahweh, who stands. Remember what we just read in the other verse. This is the one who's chosen to stand before Yahweh. Whoever that is, that person shall be killed. Because this is how you purge out. He calls this evil if you don't do what you're instructed. Now let's understand. It does not say that the leadership needs to come to you and interfere and intervene and get all involved in your life and meddle with you. This is you going to them. And I had a real problem with a lady, and we have people here that know about this, but I'm not going to mention her name, because she came for counsel, and took none of it. My opinion. I think she didn't do anything that we told her. So the next time she called, I said, why do you keep calling me if you're not going to listen to anything I say? You're wasting my time and yours. Now, I'm not going to take you out and stone you. We don't have the jurisdiction. But I can say, if you're going to come to me, okay, from a position of I don't know what to do, you should tell me if you're just taking an opinion poll. Because if you are, I'm going to turn you around. I don't take opinion polls. Go ask somebody else if you're just taking a poll. Okay, if you just want a bunch of opinions so you can pick whichever one you like, go do that somewhere else. I'm here to give guidance and instruction so that people will successfully do whatever they need to do. If that's not what you want, don't come to me. I am not going to come to you and dictate and come and meddle in your life. We don't have a cultish thing like that. But if you're going to choose to come and seek, he says you are to listen. So let that be a parameter that you hold clearly in your mind when you come for leadership to counsel. Because you can't go to the leadership and counsel and then I say something, you go, no, and start arguing with me, and then say, forget it, I'm not listening. Then why did you come to me? Well, I know why. Because you were hoping I would tell you what you wanted to hear. Had this happen the other night. Somebody called me. He'll know who he is. He's not here. He's in a live stream. And wanted to share something with me and said, I want to make sure I made the right decision about something. And he was convinced I would say he did. He didn't. I didn't think he did. So I said, no, I don't actually agree with that. He wasn't happy for a little bit, but then he said, but no, I am your student, and I'm going to listen to what you say. After he got over the disappointment and shock that I was going to tell him, you made a wrong decision, and you need to fix it. But now I've already set myself up. Well, that's your problem. You made a wrong decision. You should have counseled first. But you didn't. That's okay. Now you still got to fix it. I can't change my answer just because it makes your life difficult. You made your life difficult. You made the decision. Now you came to me and said, did I make the right decision? Now you get to hear my counsel. If my counsel is no, that's what it is. If you don't like it, stop coming to me to counsel. I'm not going to make something up and try to guess what you want to hear. Deuteronomy 17:17 requires me to tell you what is the counsel that I believe is the counsel, whether you like it or not, whether it's convenient or not, whether it puts you in a really sticky place, because I'm not the one that put you there. You did. I just brought it to your attention. But now you're in a sticky spot. Well, that happens a lot. We're always in sticky spots. You'll survive. You'll live. May have created some awkwardness in some relationships you have, but that's what it is. But let's understand, if you're going to come, if, big capital letters, I-F, if, because you don't have to. If you're going to come to leadership and you're going to counsel, you must do what you're told, or you're having an arrogance problem and you could be really in trouble scripturally. Why is this so important? Because as you do to any authority, he sees as that's the way you would treat him. That's why even Yeshua said to be respectful, and Paul said the same thing, to be respectful of authorities. That doesn't mean that you break Torah because of them, but you can say no respectfully. You could say, look, even if I've gotten pulled over for speeding. Anybody else? No, I'm the only one. Okay. All right? I'm hyperactive. I can't drive slow. I have a problem. I admit it. But when I get pulled over, you know the first thing I say is, I apologize to the officer because I don't want to be disrespectful for breaking the law. All right? So even if you are not going to do something someone says, like mom calls you up and says she wants you to come over to Christmas dinner, you say, I really can't do that, Mom. But you can find a respectful way to do it. Because I know a lot of people have a trouble as adults. How do I honor mother and father? Honoring mother and father doesn't mean doing what they say. There's a way to show them respect and still not do what they say. Say, I know that's what you want, but I can't do this, blah, blah, blah. And you explain why, but you do it respectfully. You don't go, Mom, don't you know that's pagan, blah, 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 blah. Just say, Mom, I know this breaks your heart. I know you want me to be there. I know you, but I hope you can respect that I'm trying to walk out my own salvation in fear and trembling. I can't do this. And you can be soft and gentle about it. Keep the fruit of the Spirit, and that's still honoring and respectful. Okay? So if you're going to come to leadership and you're going to ask for counsel, you have to come ready and prepared to take the counsel. Okay? You cannot argue with that. You can discuss it, but once the decision or the judgment is rendered by the leadership, this is what you should do, you need to do it. If you don't feel comfortable with that leader, don't go and ask him. Remember the if, giant letters, if you do it. Don't do it if you're not going to be comfortable to trust the answer. Okay? Leadership's not there for an opinion poll. Now, of course, if you want, maybe leadership would be if you ask him, look, I just want your opinion. This isn't counsel. I'm just curious. The leader may say, I really don't do opinion polls. I don't. Don't come to me because I'm here to get results. If you ask me to show me a problem, I'm going to give you the answer I think will get you the correct result, and that is expected to be done. Okay? I don't want to just throw my stuff out there and then you just decide to just throw it like on the floor somewhere. Why do I want to put that much? Because I'm responsible, by the way, if you do what I say and it's wrong. That's not on you, that's on me. I take full understanding that if I instruct you and you do it, if it goes bad, you're innocent, I'm guilty. You can actually stand at the throne of judgment in front of the Father, and he asks you why you did this, and you say, well, I went for counsel, and the leadership that you put in front of me told me to do this, and I did what they said, and he can say, you're innocent, he gets the double blame. That is a legitimate answer. It's not legitimate, though, if you went and found yourself an ear tickler who you knew would tell you what you wanted and said, well, I did what he said. He'll know your heart. He'll know what you did. Am I clear with that? So you can't just find someone who's going to agree with you so that they get the blame. You need to go to someone who you don't know what they're going to say necessarily, but you trust their counsel and you're going to do it, whatever it is. Then your heart was, I was submitting to that authority, and in submission, that blame now gets transferred, if there is any, to the leader. Everybody follow that? Okay, any questions before we close? Okay, Dale's got his hand up. But that was a real important one. Deuteronomy 17 has got to be understood. It is abused by leaders and misused by those underneath. So remember, the key word there was if. You do not have to come, but if you do, you have to listen. All right? Dale.
So, Rabbi, if you are under authority and the authority is instructing you to do something outside of Torah, what's your take on that? Should they find another anointed, appointed? Because based on what you said, the counsel is given and it's outside of Torah. Are you being disobedient by not listening? Or are you making a judgment call and going, you're wrong, I need to do the right thing?
I wish I'd actually added that to the mix. That's a really important point. If you go to counsel with someone you believe is anointed and appointed, and their counsel is to break Torah in some way, they're not as anointed and appointed as you thought, and you need to go find yourself someone new. But bear in mind, it has to be because they're teaching against Torah, not because they're teaching against what you would rather they said. If they're telling you to do something that breaks the Torah as counsel, then you would need to move on. And maybe they weren't as anointed and appointed as you thought. Remember, that whole thing has to do, again, with looking at the fruit. You may think somebody is anointed and appointed to be that leader, and after time, you'll know for sure as you go and taste of it and experience it and ask them questions and go for counsel, and then you'll see. Because some people are real impressive from a microphone in their teaching and stuff, and it turns out that when you actually work with them, they're not as anointed and as appointed as you thought. They just happen to know the scripture pretty good, okay? Or maybe their anointing and appointing is just for teaching, but then you find this hypocrisy there. Remember we talked about the integrity thing, because now when I asked the council about how to walk it out, now all of a sudden they're a little different than they were from the microphone. Now they're telling me it's okay to go do something I shouldn't do. So you got to be careful with that. Excellent. Thank you for bringing it up. That was a missing piece that I should have said. Nate. You're confusing me. You were back there. Now you're over here.
I'm not a creature of habit. We were at a conference up in New York City, Messianic conference. The gentleman got up on stage. This is an approved teacher by the people who were conducting it. And he was basically explaining to everybody, my relative cooked a ham whatever. And he said, because I love my mother, I decided to put that away, and I said, I'm going to eat it because of her intentions, you know, and my wife will give you more of the detail.
The wife just looked at him like, that's not exactly right. Give me the mic.
It was actually a well-known teacher, and it was a huge conference, and they went up there.
We're talking about an organization that oversees lots of congregations and has some approved, well-known teachers in that organization at this big conference saying what? What did he say?
That if you go to somebody's house and they spend all day in love preparing a pork chop dinner for you, you are to pray over it, give thanks for it, and eat it, as not to offend and cause a brother to stumble. I had a really huge issue. I had to get up and walk out. I was going to make a scene. You'd be proud of me. I just walked out. But I had to go find some of the other people to find out. I needed to vet out who was in agreement with that statement and who was not.
Right.
And at that point, I said, for me, it was a matter of breaking Torah, because if I'm allergic to strawberries and somebody in love slaved over a strawberry shortcake for me, I'm going to say, I'm so thankful that you thought of me while you were making that, but I can't eat it. For me, that it would kill me. If you would have talked to me, I would have let you know what I couldn't eat, but I'm so thankful that you thought of me. But so that bothered me that they took scripture out of context and then tried to insert it as Torah.
And this is a big name guy. And I think I could guess who it is. So, Oh, okay. Oh, that's who it was? Oh, okay. Listen, you need to be aware, and you need to vet your teachers. And you need to listen when they say things that will make you go, really? He just said that? Because these things can be very, very challenging. Look, I was at a conference, not a conference, I was guest speaking at a congregation. I found out the head elder, it wasn't the head of the whole congregation, but like the next guy in line to the leader of the congregation, missed half the Saturdays because he was working. I said, how did he get to be an elder? How did he get to be an elder and he works Saturdays twice a month or whatever it was? My brain couldn't wrap around that. I wanted to take the leader and wrap something else around him. I said, what's wrong with you? Why are you making someone an elder who works on Shabbat? David. See that
myself there for a second.
I was telling everybody else how to hold the mic right, and then you messed it up.
Yeah, all right. Anyway, so I've had experiences like that as well, where I'm dealing with somebody who has a Jewish background, albeit it was a secular background, and this particular leader, who was recognized by his congregation, was having issues with cancer, and so I felt like felt for him. And so I hung out with them, prayed for him, and this and that and the other. And then over the course of hearing some of his messages, I realized that this guy is taking what he thinks the Ruach's telling him and going against what he already knows is in Scripture and going ahead and setting up a Christmas tree in his house because he thought that the Spirit told him to do this. And I am so thankful for understanding the Ruach and that entire message, because that totally clarified all of that for me, 100%.
Oh, good.
But at the same time, even at that time, I understood, I can't agree with this. That's not remotely correct. Not to mention, I've mentioned it before, a particular rabbi that said, okay, you can keep Shmini Atzeret, and that would be perfectly fine, but you can also, and these people are out there tickling ears.
Shemini Atzeret is the 8th day festival at the end of Sukkot, at the end of the Feast of Tabernacles. Just in case, we got to be careful. We have new people might be online or even here.
Yeah, I apologize.
That's okay. Shemini Atzeret means the festival of the 8th day. It's after the 7 days of Feast of Tabernacles. It's that 8th day festival.
And so the bottom line is, we all have to vet what that person teaches and what their attitudes toward Torah are and everything else. Otherwise, you're basically placing your life in the hands of somebody who doesn't have the interests of Torah and Yud Vav He in mind.
Amen. All right, it's almost 1:30. Dawid, you got a microphone. Go ahead and close us in prayer.
Kind of thought you'd do that. Abba, thank you, Elohei Yisrael. We come before you, blessing you and thanking you for all the understanding and insight you've given us from your word. We ask you to send us forth in peace, going forth to do your will to the best of our ability. Give us understanding and wisdom to use what we've learned today in ways that please you and don't please necessarily our ears or anything else, but please you. Help us to understand the burden that leadership has, and that we need to vet our leaders and seek the man that you've placed over us and not the man that we think should be over us. So let us send us forth in peace and joy on this festival day. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Okay, so just a reminder, when we're at lunch, I may have to give more announcements about how the rest of the day is going to play out. The rain seems to subside, and then it picks up again, and we'll figure that out. Also, the marketplace will be open at different times during the day. Make sure that Mr. Kurt is around. He's been running the marketplace, so you can talk to him about when he might be in here. So if we're not doing stuff outside, we certainly might have time to do things here. Okay, the CDs, yeah, we can put those out. We can open that up. We don't have to do that now. We're going to run and eat lunch. But when we come back, just open it up. Remember, on the left-hand side are single CDs. Each pile has one teaching, one part. The next to that are ones that are in clear plastic. Those are 2 parts. The ones next to that in rubber bands are full sets. Take the whole set. Okay? And so Kurt will be there. And if you're not sure, let the people that really need those CDs get them first. They're free. You don't have to pay for them. The teaching CDs on the tables in the back on the right here. Okay? And then whatever's left, anybody else can go ahead and grab a hold of.